My grandfather was a park service ranger, and he would always tell me these stories. Apparently, on the plot of land that he owned, there was some kind of weird figure that would appear every so often. Now, you couldn't ask him exactly what it was and get necessarily a clear answer, because it would change from time to time. He basically wasn't sure exactly what it was, and each time he would describe it different, usually using the different emotions of which he felt while spotting it. Exactly the same thing would happen with my grandma. Sometimes it was like this thing was angry, sometimes it was like it was hurting, sometimes it was like it was lonely, and sometimes it was like it was lost. But one thing was sure, they always reported seeing it, and it actually gone back to their parents and grandparents. Now apparently there was some kind of ancient burial site upon this land, and I didn't know about it until I got older. But allegedly, there have been multiple sightings of something tall, skeletal in appearance, which apparently would roam the land randomly. The first time of which it was sighted was near the small river and the lake that's on the back of their property. Apparently, it was seen virtually hovering across the water by my great-grandpa. Apparently he was hunting one day and stopped for a while to rest by it when he saw this thing. Apparently it scared him so much that he actually tried to fire shots at it. He said either he had the worst aim in the world that day, or that thing was some kind of spirit and the shots were going through it. He didn't know. He was so scared that he actually left his gun there. It was out of ammo by that point, but he wanted to get away as quick as possible and not necessarily carry any dead weight whatsoever. The next time it was spotted was by his wife a few years later. Apparently she was out trying to pick wild berries on their property one day when she could see a skeletal head staring at her from behind a tree. At first she thought it was some kind of animal that had died there many years ago and they hadn't realised, but then she said the thing moved. So weird sightings actually come from their guests too, and not only them. Even all the way up to my grandpa. Apparently my grandpa first realised it was there when he was there during one Christmas. And apparently he was out playing with some of the other kids and he noticed a strange gown. He said this time it was red in colour, which was weird because usually it appears as black. At first he thought it was a tree, or at least the stump of a tree, of which was different colour to the rest of the woods, until he realised it was moving and he can see a face. The way that he describes it, now God bless him, he doesn't have much knowledge of Star Wars, but he said it looked like one of the characters with 4 lightsabers. I can't remember the specific name, but you know the one when it's got its hood up, but if it was red. From the sounds of that story, I was pretty creeped out by my grandpa, but then he says there was more. Apparently, there was another time that he was playing with his friends, and he actually saw multiple of this thing. Weirdly, apparently it also had glowing orange eyes. That's how he noticed there was more than one. He can't say for absolute certain because it was quite dark at this time, but he's pretty convinced it was, and they weren't isolated incidents. Now, I actually spent a lot of time out of there. I ended up spending quite a lot of time to just get away from my parents. At least that's what I think they were doing. My grandparents had a lot of time to look after me, so I was often there. My memory of my grandparents was absolutely loving. I honestly couldn't have asked for better grandparents who were more loving or caring. It's something I don't think I really appreciated so much when I was young actually, because they were kind of always there. So it's something that I kind of got a better appreciation for and grasp as when they weren't here, which I always regretted. But anyway, so I remember taking some walks there during the summertime when I was a bit younger. I've grown up with these stories pretty much all my life, so probably about 8 or 9 out of 10 times that I'd actually go out there, I was half expecting to have some kind of horrifying encounter. Though it never really happened, I actually went out there multiple times with an overactive imagination, really wishing that something would happen to me. The stupidest thing I ever did was I actually called for it a few times. Now, I don't know why I actually did this, but again, nothing would happen. I remembered one specific day though when I was out there seemed to be some kind of haze up ahead. It was almost like there was a big filter and there was some kind of fog which wasn't there before suddenly over part of the scenery. I do think to myself that this is particularly weird. It's something I haven't seen before and my young mind can't comprehend it. I had a really weird feeling too, and strangely there was some kind of static in the air which was making the fibres on my jumper stand up and also the hair on my arms and the hair on my head. I looked up scared there was going to be a lightning strike. I've been told about them before. This was before you had the videos to watch on the internet, but I was aware of it. I think maybe they told me in school about it one day, but I digress. I did look up and there was no rain clouds whatsoever. So I think this is specifically weird. It's almost like I'd walked into some kind of electrical storm, of which there was no storm, just the electrical aspects of it. So this was a deeply weird moment. I kind of felt uncomfortable. I've looked up the feeling later on in life and it's similar to what those experience when they're in the vicinity of infrasound. Just a deep unhappiness and feeling that something is off, where your mind and body can't comprehend what's happening. I remembered walking around for a while. I kind of wanted to see the Reaper thing. Every time I said the word Reaper, my grandpa would say, no, that's not it, no. But that's how I described it, and that's how it sounded. So yeah, I was looking for this thing constantly, but nothing would happen, so I headed back. I think this was really odd. I remembered when I got home, my grandparents asked what was wrong with my hair, and I said, I don't know, some kind of storm. They both looked at each other and my grandpa laughed. He knew there wasn't a storm. It was really nice and sunny outside. He thought I was just messing around or something, or had wore one of his hats and not said. He actually brought this up and I said, no, I'm serious. That's what it was. He then laughs and we got about our day. I constantly pester him though to learn more and more about the Reaper. He tells me not to call it that. He describes it as an entity, but I continue with my term. I say, how do you feel when it's there? What happens? He says, I don't know, you just kind of feel off, almost like you're being hunted, and you'll know when that thing is there. You feel like you're being watched. I've had it times where I could look up between two trees and there was something staring at me through them. As I locked eyes, my vision would go blurry and there it would be, that horrible skeleton looking thing. Apparently too, sometimes it would appear with more of a horse head, which actually sounded more scary to me. Whenever you actually got to where it was before, there was also a bad smell allegedly. The thing that I wasn't too scared about though is that apparently it never actually harmed anyone or anything. Well, at least that's what I thought. Apparently, they had a pet dog there before which everybody loved. It was a really nice Labrador and it would roam the land freely. However, one night, the dog didn't come back and they start to panic a little bit. They think, oh god, what if this dog has actually gone into the river and drowned? Then one of the neighbours actually reported seeing something by it, and the description sounded like our dog or an animal very similar to it. So worried, we decide to head over and see what's wrong, my grandfather says. When they get there, they can only describe a scene out of a horror film. Apparently the dog was there, but it was entirely drained of blood, and there were some bite marks near its neck. I don't know what kind of creature could have possibly done that. I just knew that it was one that I did absolutely not want to encounter now or at any point in the future. So what did you do, Grandpa? I buried it, very deep in the ground. He said weirdly though, no flowers seemed to grow around there, or plants, or anything, not even moss. I now feel a little more unsettled and I start to sweat a little bit as I'm uncomfortable in my chair. I actually felt quite stressed out by hearing that. I can see by the look in my grandpa's face that he wishes that he didn't tell me that and I was probably too young to hear it. He says, now son, listen to me. Don't be scared to go out of there. Haven't seen it for years. It could have been anything. I mean, that was kind of a back in my day thing. Now you're probably safe out there. Yeah, great, I thought. I could not stop thinking about this thing. The problem was too, like I said, this is back in the day when that you can only really research things through libraries or actually seeing them and experiencing things. But again, I'm not going to go to the library. And why not explore? For a couple of weeks I actually refused to go out through the forest, but eventually the curiosity and inquisitive part of me took over, so I head out once more. I'm going down a trail and walking down quite a steep incline. My grandpa was supposed to repair stairs here, but he hasn't. Well, kind of more like board decking, but it's quite annoying really. I eventually make it down and I get my white shoes very dirty. I'm just going to wash them off in the lake later on though, I think. Now, as I continue down doing my exploring, I'm pretty convinced nothing is going to happen when I see something odd. I can see a hand moving behind a tree. It's a very white hand too at that. It almost looked impossibly white. Then the clouds move behind the sun and I can see that it's kind of like a dark yellow colour. That's odd. It looks extremely skinny. I thought maybe it was some kind of animal. It kind of looked more like a chicken leg, I guess, than anything, but I didn't dare get closer to it as I saw one of the thumbs moving. I'm now not sure if what I was looking at was some kind of caterpillar or something similar to that, as I start to make my slow retreat to get away from it. I think it's weird. Just as this happens, that weird static starts to pick up in the air again and I can taste a metallic thing in my mouth. I don't know what it is, but I have a cold sweat now, and I quickly head back to my grandpa's. I decided not to say what had happened because I wasn't likely to be allowed out again if I said that I've gone off exploring on my own without telling anyone. My excuse for going out there was something much different, so I knew it wouldn't necessarily sit well if they'd found out what had actually happened. So now, I just go to bed, but I can't stop thinking of it. There was just something odd about it. I had no idea what I'd seen at that time, and that part of me was eating me up. So I decided to do another adventure. Now this is the following day. I go to the exact spot where the hand is, and while I'm walking there, I can't get the possibilities out of my head. I wish I had somebody else there with me to go exploring with, but I think my grandpa's going to be annoyed if I tell him. He was also doing some work on the cars now. He'd actually made me promise him before that I wouldn't go out there too far on my own, and I made a promise and I wasn't going to break that because it would upset him. I was being brave though. I was just hoping I wouldn't end up like the dog. Now I make it to the exact tree where I saw the hand, and weirdly, some of the ground below it seems to have died. It's almost like you've got all these perfectly healthy trees everywhere, but suddenly, on this specific one, just where the hand was, it seems like it's just dead, like loose bark, and also the ground doesn't have any plants which seem to be surviving. I do check a couple of times to make sure that this is actually the exact same tree, and it turns out that it is, which again is super weird for me. I'm not sure what to think of it. I decide to explore further and further. Now I do this for quite a long time, because eventually the sun starts to set, and I now realise that it's time for me to get back. That's when I noticed something strange that I didn't before. There's some kind of pile of sticks in the ground that wasn't there before. I initially thought it was my grandpa making some kind of bonfire or something, so I'm actually more confident and happy in this moment. I'm expecting to see him and to go and say hello to him, and to have a little explore around together. Well, I get closer and closer and I realise that something is quite odd actually. It seems like this little pile is not sticks, they're bones. Now I don't know where these bones could have possibly come from. I go to pick one up, but I'm froze there for a second. Something just felt odd, and I have that strange feeling coming over me again. Like something is odd, and something bad might be about to happen. Now it sounds very similar to what my grandpa described, with the feelings of everything. And I notice this is strange. The pile was probably about 2 feet tall, and I thought that was extremely weird. I then head back. I don't get too far back when I hear some kind of language spoke. I thought maybe it was somebody from a foreign place, but it sounds different. It's almost like very loud, deep sounds in a quick succession which then stop, and some kind of growling type sound. I'm froze there trying to see where this is coming from, and I just cannot find it. Now, I decide to turn away from this. I don't want to scare myself. It's getting dark and I'm not far away from getting in trouble with my grandpa and my grandma and my parents, and I don't want to have to suffer the consequences of that. So I continue bounding along until I'm halfway back. I don't hear the sounds again, but I think this is rather odd. Then, as I'm halfway back, I see something from behind a tree, which I can't describe. Somebody steps out, who I'd have to describe as about 7 feet tall, wearing a very flowing gown. And I look up, and I can see dark holes where eyes are supposed to be, and I see the face of a skeleton, and something animated moving around with it. It's not moving normally, it's kind of dancing, zigzagging from side to side, almost like it's glitching for a second. I say, huh? I say grandpa, thinking that it's him somehow, but it isn't. I look around and everything seems so dark, and it sounds like a storm's about to pick up. I'm froze there for a while, as this thing seems to slowly edge towards me. It's very hard to tell what direction that it's actually going in, because it kind of moves backwards before it goes forward. I decide to walk further down. I'm actually closer to home this way to see if this thing's following me, and it seems to. I was honestly awestruck by this. I didn't immediately connect the dots of what I was seeing to what my grandpa had described before, and other members of my family, but I moved down a bit further now. This thing was moving extremely slow. I mean, probably like quarter of my walking speed. For a good 5 or 10 minutes, I kept changing directions to see if this thing would stop following me, but it wasn't. It was getting closer and I didn't realise it at first, until I can see more and more detail. This thing looked just like the Reaper, just as I thought, and now the cards all fell on me at once. I scream and start running, and just like in your dreams, I seem to run extremely slow. I don't know why this was actually, I still don't to this day, but my legs were probably so scared that I couldn't run with any kind of pace whatsoever. So I'm left there trying desperately to get away from this thing, going slow as anything, and I seem to be not going much quicker myself. I heard snapping sounds now too. They're very loud, almost like gunshots, but it sounded like something was snapping in half constantly. I eventually make it back towards where my grandparents' house is. I was absolutely covered in sweat, and my grandma finds me there and says, "God, did you go swimming?" I say no, and I can't let out the words. I eventually get back in, and she punishes me and tells me off for going swimming in the lake. I get told to bath off quickly, and that I better explain to my grandpa why I was swimming out there. I'm stuck in the bath, literally shivering. It was a hot bath too. That's how scared I was. When I saw my grandpa, I actually didn't have the heart to tell him what I was doing and what I saw. It wasn't until months later that I could actually reveal what happened and why I wouldn't go out of the house and why I was so scared that night. He then looks at me and says, "I know what you saw, son, just please don't go out there again." And I agreed. I never did. Eventually I got older and completely forgot about the experience. That was until I had a bad dream which reminded me of it. I don't actually believe the Reaper's a real thing, but I don't know how else to describe what I saw that day. I want you guys to let me know what you think it could have been. I don't know if my incidents were isolated too, but I'm really having nightmares about it again and I want them to stop. I want to get closure to this. My father is a park ranger, and even when he was off duty, he still liked to take me on trips out into the great wilderness. We went to quite a few different national parks, but something that I'd like to share with you is a rather strange experience that we had while we went on one camping trip during the summer. Now, we were planning to be out here for about 4 days, and this is during the summer break. It meant that a lot of different places were very busy, but my father, having the career that he did, knew one that would be a very quiet place we could go to, and I was all up for it. At the time, I was doing okay in school, but I didn't really know what I wanted, really. At the time, I was pretty sure I was going to end up in the military, but it didn't happen for a few reasons. But because of this at the time, my dad thought it would be a good idea to take me out into the woods just to get accustomed to being outside. It made a lot of sense, and obviously you're going to spend time camping out if you're in the military, so it was a pretty good idea, we thought. I did have some summer school things that I needed to do which were coming up, and I really didn't want to do them. I don't know, the idea of summer school just never really made sense to me. The way that I'd look at it is that you're on summer vacation for a reason, and you shouldn't have to do more things in between. I think it should be a time that you can really rest and recover, but my mum didn't think so. Again, I think my dad understood this, and that's why he was quite willing to take me on a nice trip I could enjoy. There's a number of different things we had planned for this particular trip. Now, on the first day we set out just for a nice hike to see the views. We had all of our camping gear with us in some old military rucksack things, my dad carrying the most. Now, during the first day, we saw a couple of people around, but I realised that the further we went, the less and less they would become. Now, this is a good thing for me because I kind of wanted to escape people a bit. It was a really good experience, and I had a good time bonding with my father over this. Now, eventually it gets closer to nightfall, and we decide that we're going to try some night fishing. It's something that I haven't done before, so I'm quite excited to do so. We eventually make it to the campground that my dad had picked out for us, so I'm pretty happy to be there and put the stuff down. My dad shows me where we can do the fishing and sets up everything and gives me a headlamp. Now, while this is happening, I haven't really done fishing before, so I'm pretty much at a loss as to how exactly I'm supposed to do this, so every 5 minutes that I haven't caught anything, I put my headlamp closer to the water looking for the fish, obviously scaring them off, and I constantly move my fishing reel around thinking that's going to make a difference, but again, it probably just scares them off. I don't know. I was more worried about hurting my hand on the fishing reel. My dad seems to be gone for quite a while though, but it doesn't really bother me at the time because I'm too caught up in trying to do the fishing. While fishing, I can hear some water disturbance. It's not close, but I definitely notice it, and I face my head up, trying to shine my lamp towards it, but obviously I can't see that far. The torch isn't that powerful. Now, I can just about make out the silhouette of something in the water before it disappears down again, and I think, wow, that must have been a really big fish. Now, something strange that happened while doing so is, out of my peripheral vision, I realised that a plant has just moved, like somebody's gone over and touched it. Now again, there's no one around but myself and my dad, and I know it's not my dad, so I'm a little bit unsettled by this. Now, I do think maybe it was just some kind of animal, so I don't think too much of it. I try and cast my fishing reel as far out as I can now. I just about do so, and my dad eventually arrives and says, "Godson, you nearly took me out with that. You have to be careful," and shows me how to do it properly. And my dad's actually doing fishing properly. We didn't eventually find anything, but he tells me not to shine the light down because it scares the fish and that you kind of want to stay still. I tell him that I'm sure there was a large fish that disturbed the waters further up, but he tells me the fish shouldn't be big enough to really do that, because I said it was similar to a person, but I think my dad dismisses this. Now it starts to get quite cold, so we head back to our campsite and settle in for the night. and it's a pretty good night. My dad was reading a book and I wasn't really sure what to do with myself, so I just started drawing some things. It's something I'd done when I was a lot younger. I don't actually do drawing anymore, but I'm pretty good at kind of like the cartoon sketches for some reason. I guess I used to draw The Simpsons and SpongeBob or something like that, but I think that's the reason that I have kind of a knack for it. And my dad was pretty impressed with my drawings. I just drew some of the forest and tried to draw the thing that I'd seen in the water earlier. Well, not necessarily the thing, but the way the water was disturbed and the plant moving. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. And that was that. We eventually fall asleep and wake up for the next day. Now on the second day, we weren't actually leaving this spot, and we were just going to do some more hiking around. My dad took me to one place and my god did it have a beautiful view there. Everything looked so pristine and beautiful, and at the time it cemented into my mind that I wanted to be a military person, because I thought, well, I'm just going to be seeing things like this all the time, and for that I was incredibly excited. Now my grandfather and his grandfather are in the military. We're kind of from a military family, so I thought it was going to be good to follow suit. Now, eventually this day comes to a close and nothing too much happened. The following morning we pack up and we're ready to go on to the last part of this, get into the last campsite, the third one. Now the hiking to get to this one wasn't too bad really, and again I was pretty pleased to go out there. I don't know why, I just felt good the whole time and it was a lovely experience. Now we get to the campground eventually and settle in for the night, and this is when things get a bit weird. I'm awoken by the sight of somebody outside the tent. I can just about see the silhouette. I say Dad, and then realise he's not there, and I quickly unzip the tent. I can see my dad holding the hunting knife and torch in the other, pointing at someone. I say Dad, Dad, and he says to stay still son, and my dad screams at somebody to get back now. Because of how bright it is, and obviously I've just come out of the dark tent, my eyes haven't adjusted, but I quickly go and grab my headlamp and turn that on, and I can see somebody covered in blood there holding a knife, just staring at me and my dad. Now, what was really crazy is what happened next. He turns round, throws himself into a tree, then gets up again, and repeats the process. He stares at us for probably 10 seconds before going up to the exact same tree near our campsite, throwing himself at it, then coming back again. I realise that he's dropped a knife and constantly picks it up, and he hasn't cut himself, and the blood and stuff is just from the tree. But what on earth is he doing? Now this gone on for a good 10 minutes before my dad tells me to start packing up everything. I quickly do so, and I didn't feel too scared in this moment because having my dad there with his knife made me feel like the safest person in the world. Now, we eventually get all of our stuff together, and I kid you not, the whole time this guy was constantly doing this same thing over and over again. I've never seen anything like it, and not even to this day I haven't. We eventually get our stuff together, and my dad tells me to hold his hand and to lead the way back. Now this is a big responsibility at the time because I haven't really been camping like this before, and I'm not certain I know the way back, but my dad tells me that he's not going to look back until this guy's out of sight. Now I do constantly glance back, and my dad tells me not to because he can see when I'm doing it because of the light, and he knows how scared I can get sometimes. But I asked my dad what's happening, and he said that the guy's constantly doing this same thing over and over again, until eventually we're at a point where my dad can take over and tells me to do the same. My dad's walking incredibly quick, and eventually we make it back. My dad quickly makes a call to the police and reports what's happening. I'm confused as heck, and eventually we get back into the car and drive home. Now it turns out that what happened, and this is something I only learned after my dad told me after a number of years, is that the police found that guy there. Apparently, he had stabbed somebody and then taken some kind of mushroom that gives you a repetitive motion syndrome or whatever it's called. and that's why he was throwing himself at the tree. Apparently he was completely out of his mind, but they managed to capture him. Now, if it wasn't for that mushroom making him repeat his motions, he could have easily continued to progress towards us and probably just stabbed us in our tents. But thank God he didn't. I'd like to give you a little bit of context before that I get on with my part of the story. Now, this was a really weird time in my life. I was in my mid-20s and everything was going really well. I mean, my career was going excellently. It took me a long while to get into this position, but I was really happy for it. And I don't know, everything just seemed like it couldn't get much better. I'd married someone that I was really happy to be with, and interestingly, my family members didn't actually all know about this. It was basically a secret wedding we had, and we were going to have another one up in the future as a more formal one, but we couldn't end up getting that far. Basically, one day when I was at my parents' house with my wife, she just turns to me when my parents have gone away and said, "Oh, by the way, I don't think we can stay married together. Since I've married you, it's really felt as though that my life has changed for the worse, and that I've become almost that stereotypical wife. And all saving for a house, I never wanted to do that, even though it's a thing she'd agreed to do with me, which I thought was really odd." Now, she also said that, "Oh, by the way, we've also got to change where we live too," which is something that really surprised me. Because, of course, the marriage thing was pretty hard to deal with, but living away too, that was going to be even harder. I knew for a fact that I absolutely did not want to go back to my parents, because where they live, it's basically miles away from everything. And one of the nicest things that happened to me was moving out with her and just getting away from everything. But now I was faced with living with strangers, which is something I'm not really that keen on. And also losing my wife and becoming alone once again. Ah yes, my old friend loneliness. Well, I say that kind of retrospectively because it's not, but you'll find out more about that later, so yeah. Anyway, I was also about to start a new job, and literally I was only 2 days past renewing the rent contract with my wife for another year. So yeah, you can imagine how much it sucked. And the job that I was about to go into was not an easy one at all. It's not your typical job, it's quite a high pressured one. But it's something I'd been excited about for months, so I'd gone from basically counting down the days to instead feeling pretty confused about everything. It was my last day at work not too long ago, and I don't know, it just kind of felt like a surreal moment. Just everyone was coming up and hugging me, it was great, and instead of it being a beautiful moment, it turned out to be quite the opposite. It it was a pretty weird feeling for me. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it, but yeah, that's that. And now at the moment, I live with my wife, and she goes out every so often and does whatever. But there's another part of this too I forgot to mention. She went for a trip away one day, and I questioned if she'd actually gone alone, and she said, "Oh yeah, I have," but in truthfulness, she hadn't. Turned out I checked her phone, and she had cheated on me and been meeting up with some other guy. The worst thing was, this was a guy that I met once. Yeah, my situation sucked and I wasn't happy, that's all I can say. So now, basically, I don't really know what to do. I'm going around seeing the odd friends here and there, but the problem is, very few of them actually understand me, and I can feel more alone being around people that don't have any empathy for my situation. Not in the sense that they have to care, but I don't like it when they just can't understand and they just immediately start talking about themselves and their own things, kind of oblivious to what's going on or what's right for me. Also, there's a few others I know too where they won't actually care about me, they'll just try and get me to do the things that they want to do because, you know, they don't want to do it alone. But it kind of leaves you in this weird limbo land, I guess is what you'd call it. You're doing everything right, but it feels like nothing's going right around you. And there's some other things too that are kind of ticking you off. I mean, it's important not to give in to temptations and to stay on the straight and narrow, but my god, does that become difficult sometimes. So that was my predicament which I was in. and I wanted to kind of get away from people. Where I live is in a major city and there's always too many people around. I always have my habit of doing my night walks with my music, but the problem is there's constantly too many people around and I just can't get left alone, it feels like. Even if I'm talking to one of my friends on the phone, there will always be somebody who seems to come up to me asking for directions or something. Completely arrogant to the fact that I'm talking to others, so yes, that leaves me with the escape plan. So I want to get back into nature and just get back to where I guess people can't hurt me. Nothing can hurt me really, but I'm being a bit melodramatic here, but you kind of get the point. There is the weaker thoughts and feelings of which are really trying to take over now, but I'm not letting them. I've been down and you can't take me there again, that's my mindset. So I set off on one particular day when I booked the day off work. I actually had the day off planned already to enjoy it. I did think I was going to enjoy it with my wife, or should I say ex-wife, but hey, here I was. So I start walking into the forest at around midday. Things are pretty okay. I'm just basically lost in my thoughts but trying not to be. I usually distract myself with music and whatnot, but this time I decided that I don't really think I should be doing that. I could probably spend my time better just trying to stay in my head and actually retrain my thoughts. Because of course my thoughts are quite negative at the minute and I don't want to fall victim to that. So I decided to go without music or anything. Another thing that I probably should have done is brought more water, but I didn't really think of this at the time. I probably filed for divorce about 4 days ago and yeah, it was a really weird feeling. The thing I didn't like is the fact that I knew I'm pretty much stuck with this person that I can't stand for at least the next month for the time that I'm getting settled into my new job. And every time I see her, it just reminds me of all the things that I didn't like of which happened. And I'm trying my best to remain civil. I'm trying my best to turn off the savage, the voice that bubbles up in my head every so often, but it was really difficult. And I was kind of failing, like, I don't know, it's a weird loss feeling. I control my breathing though every so often, and I find that this really helps and makes a big difference for me. I'm one of those people where I can make myself win, or I can also make myself lose in my head if I'm not being too careful, so I decided to choose the winner's path. Now, I'm very glad to say that there was nobody around at this particular time. Now, I was trying to take my mind off other things too, like work commitments and other projects I needed to complete before starting the job. I mean, yeah, I could book 4 days off, including the weekend, and not really be able to enjoy it because of work commitments. I was supposed to get a raise soon, but I knew it was going to be difficult for it to come through, but I suppose everybody has those problems, don't they? I remembered when walking I kind of felt a bit fearless, which is something I haven't experienced for a few years. This one, however, was quite pleasant, and it actually come from supreme confidence. I've become an extremely confident person in the last few years, and that always serves me well. It's really weird though, it's almost like I've got most of the jigsaw complete, but not all of it. There always seems to be a piece missing for which I'm trying to put in there, but I never seem to be able to. I seem to be the great philosopher who can see what other people need to do, whereas I'm almost a stranger for myself in terms of advice, or at least listening to it. A lot of what I say seems to fall onto deaf ears when I'm talking to myself, and I feel like if my walls can hear me talk, they would tell me just shut up and be quiet. But anyway, I get further and further into my walk and I do feel very sweaty. I'm somebody who does tend to sweat quite a lot. I mean, even at the best of times in winter, I have to be careful about even wearing coats which are too heavy, because very quickly I can start to sweat and just feel horrible. I do have a new special deodorant I can use, but it doesn't really work, but the sweat was bothering me. Not just because of the fact I might smell, but I knew that I'd probably sweat through the deodorant which I was wearing, so obviously it's going to be quite annoying if I still had a lot further to go and I started to sweat. No issues, I just threw my shirt off temporarily. Now as I do this, it does become apparent how many bugs and insects are around, but they never seem to bite me really. Well, at least I think that until I can't stop scratching above my neck. It was a really weird feeling. It was almost like somebody had put something on me, but I couldn't quite take it off. I'm not too worried and just keep going. I'm trying not to wipe the sweat off because I know it helps cool you down. I go further and further into the forest now, and I feel quite comfortable. This is actually in an area that I'm not too familiar with, and I suppose that it served me well. It's around springtime, and lots of the greenery has returned to the trees and the surrounding nature. There's lots of moss and other things on the trees around me. It looks really cool. I can smell more and more of the plants and wildlife, and it starts to make me feel more comfortable and almost at peace and like I'm at home kind of. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is all I needed to get the clarity in my head. I just had to go for a nice walk and get away from everything. Every so often thoughts of my ex creep into my mind because we used to do little treks like this sometimes, and I'm trying my very best not to let it bother me because it can do so easily. Every time that I have a thought of her, I let it creep again to the back of my mind, almost like a breath in and out, or waves in the ocean. Now, as I'm walking, I do have a feeling that somebody else is here and with me. I'm not a spiritual person, but I do kind of believe that everybody has like a guardian angel. I've actually seen a psychic who told me that it was my great grandma, and I do believe she is with me, and that's what I think in this particular moment. Of course, I'm not delusional. I don't expect them to fend off every evil in the world, but I do kind of like the idea of her being here looking after me, so I just presume that she's with me. Every so often I can smell a smell of perfume, and it's pretty cool. This is something that's happened before. My dad apparently is more sensitive to things like this, and I keep on smelling a nice perfume smell, and I say hey and her name and I smile to myself. I don't know why, I just knew that in this particular moment that she was with me and that everything was going to be okay. Or at least that's what I keep telling myself. And I'll progress into a part of the forest which has kind of denser plants on the ground. The trees are always high and hard to see around, but these plants in particular seem to really be obstructing my view. I think this is okay though, and just keep pressing on further. I'm cautious not to go too far because I don't have any water with myself and I don't want to be out here alone. I just got a new mobile phone too, and I've had issues where that it doesn't always get signal. Also, some of my accounts seem to go public, which I'd set private for a while, then logging in again, and I just didn't like the feeling, almost like my privacy was breached. Around a corner, and I'm taking on some slight elevation, but it's not enough to cause any issues. I decided to stop for a little while, and I have to do up my shoelaces. One of my shoes is annoying me because it's kind of cutting into my ankle a bit. I tried to undo the shoelaces a few times, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. I'm kind of wearing them like, you know how people wear really expensive shoes with all the laces undone, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. I decide that each step forward I'm going to try and block out the pain, but my god, that was difficult to do. Weirdly though, every time I look at my actual ankle it seems to be in good health and as though nothing's wrong with it. Now, I continue on this walk. The perfume smells left me, and I turn around for a second and see what appears to be a hiker. They seem to be just off in the distance. They're wearing some black overalls or something, and they just go behind a tree. I don't really think much of it and just think, well, I've got to pick up the pace to get away from these people now. I remember too that I really miss seeing my brother at this point. He was aware of everything which was happening and we made a few calls, but I really wanted to see him and meet up and do things with him, but he wasn't available, and that was kind of hard to deal with. It's almost like having a best friend that lives out of state where you see each other occasionally, but the days that you really need someone there at least with you, they're not able to, but I guess that's fine. I suppose that's how life goes. I remembered stopping for a moment because I noticed that my shoelaces were dragging a bit, and that's when I realised they weren't. It was someone coming from behind. I look around for a few seconds and said, hey. I don't get a reply, so I just presume that whoever this is being extremely rude to me, so I think, well, I'm just going to press on instead. I do feel a little bit uncomfortable now for the first time. I mean, I'm not a small person. I'm over 6 feet slightly. Not really that built, but quite strong, and I know some martial arts, so yeah, I'm not too bothered. I am worried though, because I don't really know where I'm going, and I don't want to get too lost out here. The last couple of weeks, when things have went wrong, I found that I'm not my usual calm, confident self. My mind kind of goes into a panic more easily, and I don't know, maybe that's just from not sleeping so well, or maybe it's a host of other things, but it's a really weird feeling. So a little bit panicked, I just pick up the pace, and my shirt's been on for a while now. I've still got a jumper which is wrapped around me, and to be honest, all it served to do is act like a radiator, so I'm walking quickly away, but I also feel like I'm far too hot at the same time, which is quite a funny feeling really. I then realised stupidly that I still have my bottle of water in my jumper pocket. I can't believe I didn't realise it was here. I slam that thing within seconds and throw the bottle off somewhere. Now, the weird thing is, when I threw the bottle, I don't actually hear it hit the ground. Yeah, it was a plastic one, but it still had a tiny bit of water left, so it should have had some weight or something. I have a weird habit of not downing all of the water completely for some reason. I know it's stupid, but yeah, I don't hear the bottle whatsoever, and I'm a little put off by this. That's when I hear it. It's kind of like a laughing sound. Now, I've heard foxes before and other animals, and it kind of sounds just like those. I thought, God, if I didn't know what this was, I'd actually be quite scared at the minute. I am becoming a little bit paranoid. I kind of feel like I've done something wrong, and that I shouldn't be out here like this, but I don't know, it's almost like something took over me. I end up going up a bit further, and eventually I find some ledges to sit on, and I'm just staring off at the trees now. I kind of forget about my situation and relax a little bit, and I remember looking at the light coming through the leaves and thinking, well, I suppose life is kind of beautiful, and it just depends how that you actually look at everything. I thought, I sure wish I had someone here to enjoy this with, and my mind starts to drift backwards again, which is quite annoying. I'm now thinking once again of the things that have gone wrong recently, and it's kind of stabbing at me quite a lot. So I keep going and pick myself up again. My eyes seem to be more fixated up this time, and I am a little bit worried about whatever the sound was behind me, but it soon stops. Now, I get a little bit further down the trail when I hear something that I can't really explain. I hear somebody call out, which almost sounds exactly like my name in a male voice. I think this is really weird, and I decide that I must keep going. But I can't figure out where they are, or who it actually is. I half think that I've run into somebody that I knew, but I knew realistically that was really unlikely, especially because of the time of day of which this occurred, so I think this is odd. And that's when I see it. There's a person who looks like they've got to certainly be homeless not too far away, wearing all black, kind of looking at me saying, hey, stop, hey. This person was actually quite tall, and I don't know, they had a really weird look in their eyes. It almost looked like their eyes are far too pale. I can't tell when their clothes are from, but it doesn't look like it's in the last couple of years. I say, no, sorry, I've got to go, and I just turn and start walking quickly. Almost military, I keep repeating to myself, watch your six, as I'm walking away from who or whatever this person is. I'm looking over my shoulder every so often, but I'm trying to do that confident walk. You know, the ones that you're kind of taught to do. Well, not really formally taught, but you know you have to look confident to not look like a victim. Yeah, I was doing one of those. I was in such a weird headspace though that I was kind of happy about everything that was happening around me. Not in the sense of this situation, but I wasn't put off by the situation. I've been in some rough situations here and there, but this one felt a little bit different. Maybe it was because of last week's events, but I wasn't worried about what happened, what didn't happen. I didn't even feel like fighting if it come to it. I don't know, I just felt weird. I look around and I can't see the person, but I can hear some movement on one side of the trees. It kind of sets in a bit now that I'm in a situation I don't want to be, and I guess panic took over, and I feel my heart beat quicker and quicker. Now, it's at a point where that I'm still walking normally, but it almost feels like there's another force inside my body. I keep telling myself, stay calm and watch your six, and every so often I look behind myself, but the person isn't there. This gone on for probably another 20 minutes until eventually I stop to catch my breath. Now, I can continue going on further, but I realise that it's probably going to become dark, and I 100% don't want to be stuck out here with whatever this is. Now, kind of tapping into my bad situation, I become a bit fearless and just turn right around. I kind of march forward a bit like a train. I don't actually know why I did this. Again, I think it was just frustration of my situation and not really being bothered with what was going on anymore. I think, God, if this is really my time, then so be it. I can't be bothered now. And I just start marching forward. I do this for about, let's say 2 or 3 minutes until my adrenaline settles down a bit and I start to feel more tired. I kind of have the feeling like when you run in a dream, but not exactly. I've always had some injury on my leg and it's really annoying. Or not always, probably in the last 5 years, but pretty much whenever I do certain kinds of exercise, my leg can really ache for ages afterwards, and I was a bit frustrated because the feeling comes back. I thought, well, I can probably make it out of here, but I'm probably going to get injured in the process, and again I get more annoyed. I can then hear movement again, and I now realise that the person isn't far away. Initially I stop to listen to where they are, and I hear them swear. Then I hear another voice swearing too, not far off. I don't know exactly what they were saying, but I was thoroughly creeped out at this point, and I know that I need to move. Now this really scares me. I don't know why, it was just something about knowing that there's more than one of these people that unsettled me. I then say, what do you want from me? One of them says, you're going to give us everything. I don't know what that means, and I say I don't have any money. They say it doesn't matter, and I just scream, I don't have my card, I don't have anything to give you. I was half tempted to tell them about what was actually going on in my situation, but I decided that the best thing that I can do is just keep going. For some reason, I didn't let up and sprint now. I used to actually be really good at running, especially long distances, but since going to the gym, I've actually got quite good at sprinting too. I got it from the sports that I used to play, but for whatever reason, I just didn't want to do it. Again, I think I was probably far too lost in all of the rubbish from within the week, but I don't sprint. I also stupidly don't look around, I'm just confidently walking away, almost like I'm in control of the situation, but obviously I'm not. That's when I feel it. Something grabs onto the back of my jumper. Within a split second, I've turned around, punched something. Turns out that I've missed what I'm trying to punch for, but whatever was holding me let go. I then pick up a full sprint within a few seconds and start screaming out some profanities. There's one particular swear word that I always say really loud, and I suppose that because I've done it so often, I've probably trained my vocal cords in it, and I do it in this situation. I ended up sprinting. I'm not sure how long that I was sprinting for, and I don't bother looking back. I keep grabbing little branches and things that are loose and throwing them behind me, hoping to deter whatever's chasing me from doing it. I'm a little bit worried though, because I think, well, a male with my size, again, I'm not saying that I'm massive, but I'm not really small, shouldn't be in a situation like this unless that these people have really bad intentions. I've already told them that I don't have any money or anything to give them, so why are they still pursuing me like dogs? Now, I probably jogged and sprinted together for about another 5 minutes before I get really angry. I turn on the spot and scream a swear word once more and say, come on then, like I'm ready for them. I don't hear anything now, just silence, and for whatever reason, that was the worst part of the whole situation. It now dawns on me that I'm lost out here, and I have no idea where the people are pursuing me. So yeah, I just turn around and I almost accept everything. Weirdly, parts of my life start flashing through my mind, the good and the bad, and in that moment I felt lots of pride for myself for everything that I'd overcome. I start walking now and pick up the pace. Now I know for a fact that a branch didn't snag onto me because when I've looked on my jumper, I can see that there's no holes or anything, so it's definitely a person that grabbed me. I lift up my shirt and to my surprise I can actually see a bruise where who or whatever it was had tried to grab on me so hard that it's actually bruised a bit. Now I ended up power walking for probably another good 10 minutes before I eventually come to roughly where the start of the trail is. Now I take one last minute to turn around and I scream again and I say come on, swearing. I think an animalistic part of my brain had finally kicked into life, and maybe it was really the fight or flight and the latter come to light. But I did feel scared though a few seconds after that. I eventually make my way a bit further up and I'm able to escape from that forest. It was such a messed up situation. I go to check my phone and of course there's no internet. I think, well, that just sums it up, doesn't it? But then I feel a sense of relief knowing that I'm out of the situation and that I don't have to worry about my phone not having internet when I'm stuck out of there. It was starting to get cold now too, which was actually really annoying. It's actually become so cold that I have to start jogging the rest of the way home, which again was so annoying for me. I could tell that my body was exhausted and I was also trying to gain weight at this time, so I knew I could say goodbye to any weight that I could have gained. Yeah, that's how I was thinking. Nothing was really coming across logically. I did think about reporting this and everything, but the more I thought of it all, I kind of realised that they were probably just homeless people and that it probably wasn't as bad as it seemed, but I don't know. When I got home I was faced with my partner again and I couldn't be bothered to actually talk to her. I kind of explained briefly what had happened, but she just didn't seem to understand. I decided that I should just save the details for myself and that she kind of didn't deserve to know almost. Now it wasn't that long ago that this situation happened to me, and I haven't really told anyone about it to be honest other than you guys, but I don't know. Let me know what you think it could have been because to be honest I really don't know. I love to tell myself that it was probably just homeless people trying to rob me, but the thing is I have contactless on my phone. I don't carry a bank card. I don't see the point, it's just another thing for me to lose. But I wonder what would have happened if they weren't happy with just taking my phone. Why were they out there? And why were they so quick to get aggressive and try and grab me? Yeah, it was pretty weird. I mean, I like to think that there was nothing too bad from it, but I guess there kind of was. And it does actually worry me a bit that I was so lost up in my head that I didn't consider the situation for which I put myself in, so yeah, I guess if it's kind of like a learning point for other people, just please try and always be aware of your surroundings and the situations which you're entering, because I know when you're emotionally reacting to things, it's easy to lose sight of what's in front of you, but sometimes that can be the most important thing for a variety of reasons. I was doing trick-or-treating one night with my older brother. I felt pretty safe doing so. I was about 11 and he was about 13. To be honest, we weren't exactly at the best age to go out on our own, but our neighbourhood was relatively safe, and my parents didn't have an issue with us doing so. All is well basically. I was dressed up as a vampire, and my brother, I don't know what he was maybe a zombie, Frankenstein, vampires, and just anything you can think of mixed together. I really wanted to get one of those scream masks. You know, the cool ones where you can pump blood in it? Well, one of my friends had one, and I was jealous, but apparently the blood would always leak everywhere. So that was annoying. Now I start off and eventually fill up my bucket pretty nicely. I remembered one funny thing happened where an older lady said, "Oh, have you not got much there? I'm on my second bucket." I didn't explain it well and she gave me a ton of things. I then explained the situation and she already closed the door. I still laugh about it today. So, we're just about to round up for the night and go and eat our stash. Everything's good. We turn back and turn around. Now, after not too long, we notice some people dressed up further ahead with some kind of campfire. Now, being young and probably naive, we just think they're other trick-or-treaters, and we're pretty interested in what they're doing. I said to my brother, "I don't know, it could be bad," but he said, "No, what if they're roasting marshmallows? We've got to go and join them." So that's what we do. We decide to go up there. I say, "But we don't have that many marshmallows," and then my brother reveals that he actually has some, which is really good. He had those giant ones, which I actually love to this day. So we start heading over there and realise that they're quite a long way from here. We also can't hear anything too, which was interesting. They're actually quite far off into the woods. Now, my father actually worked as a police officer and he'd given us a lot of information about stranger danger, but at the time we were not thinking of this at all. We just want to get out there. As we're making our way over there, we're dropping candy left, right and centre on the floor. I shouldn't have done it, but I guess we were too young to care. Now we probably walked about half a mile when we hear something. A very loud metal sound. It sounded like somebody dropped a big iron hammer on the ground. Weirdly, it sounded like the sound come from very close to us, which is weird. My brother then grabs my hand and says, "Quick, hide," and we hide behind a tree. What was more weird is that everybody by the campfire stops, and they look in our direction. We think this isn't a good situation, but what was the sound? We're kind of naive, but we know that we're in danger now, so decide to stay put and not move at all. This goes on for probably about 20 seconds or so, before my brother realizes something. He says, "Hey, Brian, look." I say, "What?" They're coming here. They're coming towards us. Now, even though they're about 400 meters away, we were too afraid to move. I say, "What's happening? What can you see?" He says, "Shush, be quiet." And I do so. Now, it's probably the most quiet that I've ever been in my entire life during these few seconds. I can see them approaching slowly in the distance, and I don't know why they're coming here, but I feel really anxious. My palms begin to sweat and I kind of get shaky. Now weirdly, there was no sound to accompany them, so you didn't really know how close they were. They start moving through the tree line until eventually I can see something. There's one dressed in white robes, then two, then three, and they're carrying something on a stick. They're also leaking water or something on the ground, and there's two more holding the other end of it. Someone's also throwing things on the ground as they walk. I really felt like my heart had stopped while I realised that they're walking straight past me and continue on up ahead. I continue shaking now, and I become incredibly nervous. I felt like I didn't breathe too, and we slowly watch as they round a corner, and there's a disgusting smell to accompany them. After about 20 minutes, we finally decide that it's safe for us to get up, and we're all very nervous. Now, it doesn't take too long before my brother decides that we've got to get a move on here, and we start to proceed up the hill. It looks like blood on the floor and a blood trail. We actually follow this on the same path getting back until eventually it disappears into the tree line. Even writing this story, I'm starting to get the shakes again. I don't know who they were or what they were doing. I'm just thankful that we didn't have to find out. Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today and enjoyed these stories. I'd like to share this quickly before I start. It's something I've said before, but I think it can be really important in helping stay on top of your mental health. I think if you're able to commit to some kind of regular exercise, it doesn't really matter what form it is, but I think just committing to any, just doing that consistency can make a really big difference to how you can feel. It also does your body a lot of good too in stress reduction. So I think that's really important because I know if you're battling with yourself, that will be a big stressful factor of your days. So if there's something that can make a difference, and I think it's really worth it. Not every day you're going to feel like going, and not every day you're going to feel like you've got much out of it, but I think overall it'll make a big difference, so it's definitely something worth trying. So I hope that can help somebody. I love you all, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care and enjoy these stories. I wanted to work as some kind of fire ranger for a while, but unfortunately, all of those jobs were taken. I mean, to be completely honest, I'm not too surprised. It was such a great job. You got a lot of time to yourself just to relax, and it wasn't too strenuous. Being out there in the nature also made a huge difference to everything. People who I knew that did that were always incredibly nice too. I wanted to do the same, but unfortunately it just wasn't in the cards for me at that time, and that's completely fine. So, instead I did a different job. Not really too interesting, but we basically used to have to build cabins. I ended up working in the building industry for most of my life. One of my good friends was a ranger, and he said, there's weird things that happens in these cabins. I said to him, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I don't know. We just get reports of sightings in these things, but I never really believed him. Everybody spoke about ghosts and stuff, and I didn't really take much notice. To be honest, even when Halloween rolled round again, I didn't really find it too interesting. I just knew that I was out here to do my job, and I was quite good at it. I'm not going to say I was the best in the world at this work, but it was definitely something that I enjoyed and that I could see myself doing on quite a consistent basis. I'd worked with my dad for a while too, so building wasn't new to me. In fact, my dad was a builder, and his dad wasn't a builder, but his father was, which is my grandfather. So I always had it instilled in me to do something like this. To be honest, it's a decision that I come to regret later in life, because I actually had quite a lot of different opportunities really to do better things, but for some reason I always turned it down. To be honest, when I was a bit younger, I actually had the opportunity to do quite a good apprenticeship for quite a big company, and I did it for a little while, but guess what happened? I didn't like the school uniform that it felt like they were making us wear, so I stopped doing it. Not such a good idea. I also had some other opportunities to do teaching and whatnot. Again, stability, good money, but I turned it down. I don't know why. I also knew that I wasn't a person who could just work in some kind of place where you don't move around a lot. Maybe like the office jobs, they just don't suit me for some reason. I prefer doing things the right way too, and I knew I was good at it. The big issue I found though, especially later in life from doing the construction and building stuff, is that, well, you might have some good spells and you might really enjoy it sometimes, but it was lonely some days. You didn't often have someone there helping you, so it wasn't very good. That was the main issue with it, and also it depended on the economy. If ever there were recessions, and we felt at the worst, and they could be really tough times, it felt like you were just constantly cracking away, but again, it didn't really feel like you were getting anywhere. That again was an issue. But hey, it's just something that I had to overcome and get on with. I was always somewhat jealous of my other friends who had the jobs that seemed so much easier. Even the rangers seemed to have a really good time, but I guess it wasn't for me, like I said. A lot of what I learnt in life is just to accept things as they are, and just to try and enjoy your time, and your time will come. It just might take a little bit longer, but that was completely fine for it to be the case. So yeah, we're going along like normal, just going up to these cabins and often tearing them down to build up new ones. We weren't necessarily on protected land a lot of the time that we did this, but the land was beautiful indeed. Oftentimes it was somebody wanting to tear one down, or just to renovate and to rent it out. I never understood why though, it seemed like the cost wasn't that much. But we'd spend a lot of time out here in the woods like this. The main issue we had was getting the supplies there really. There was obviously only so much that you could carry and only so far you could go. What we had to do a lot of the time is on the trails and stuff just stack up some materials, so that way we could just kind of feed it along every so often. I'm not gonna lie, the work was well and truly backbreaking and it took a lot out of me to do things like that. I struggled in the sun, but luckily at the time of most of the work, the trees were giving us good coverage from it. I remember once, we went to check on some of the supplies and something really heavy had gone missing. It was weird because it was close to the path, but we had some pretty heavy machinery there to help us cut up woods and things, but it was just gone. It was like somebody just picked it up and stolen it, but it seemed to have vanished within the space of about 5 or so minutes when we went back for something. Couldn't figure out what it was. We actually weren't too annoyed about it though, because luckily it was insured and it was due for an upgrade, but I thought that was really weird. Who would have took our machinery out here? I remember something strange though after this happened. When I was walking back, every so often my eyes would go out of focus and refocus again. Actually, I can probably say more accurately, it was almost like my vision FPS slowed down a lot. You know, like if the quality drops and it's kind of more like a flipbook for a few seconds, then it would go back. I just started drinking some more water. I noticed a few of the other guys were doing the same, and I asked why they were drinking so much, and they'd said the exact same thing as me, which we think's really weird. Strangely, it only started after we'd gone back to that area. Pretty odd. But anyway, we got some more work to do. I remembered I was sitting down taking a break and I'd hear people running around. I was quite tired, so I actually didn't take too much notice of it at first and just kind of let it happen around me. But then after a little while I thought, you know what, this is quite weird. It would almost sound like there were tens of people running through the forest, like you'd hear the sounds of them rustling through the trees and whatnot. But then, as soon as I looked up, nobody was there. Really odd. And then go to sit down by the lake just to cool off a bit more. Or ravine, I'm not sure what you call this. And that's when I see something really creepy. There's a bear. There's a really large bear standing in the water not too far away. I don't know why it looked really creepy, just the way it was stood there. I'd never seen one before until this point. I was a bit anxious by it, though I knew truthfully there wasn't too much for me to be worried about. This thing wasn't really going to attack me, right? The ones in the area were known to be relatively friendly as long as you leave them alone, but this looked weird. Again, odd, I can hear the sounds of rustling around me, but I can't see any trees being disturbed. It starts to creep me out a little bit, so I decide that it's time for me to head back to the other guys. I say, guys, I think I saw a bear. They start laughing at me saying, oh, did that steal it? I say, no, you idiots, I mean, it's a bear, literally just a bear. They all kind of hushed up a little bit, realising that I wasn't trying to make a joke out of the situation before. They asked me to describe it, and I say about the size of this thing, and one of the other guys says, nah man, you're just imagining it, we don't get them that big out here. Because what I saw was about 7 feet tall when it stood up, but apparently there's no bears that big here, so yeah, do you want to have a look? He says alright, so we both walk down again. Again, I was a bit anxious now because I thought, well, what if this thing's got closer? I thought we should be able to smell it though because it was in the water, but again, can't really smell much of anything. Big bears out here, but we don't know where. We ended up nicknaming the site Big Bear because of it. It sounded pretty cool too. Now we have further investigations but cannot find a thing, so decide to go back somewhat more cautiously. None of us have a good way to defend ourselves here, we were just preying upon the good nature of the beast. Hopefully that's something of which it could uphold, but I couldn't be certain. So we get working again, and we start tearing down this other cabin. It's actually got an upstairs part, which I think is pretty cool. I had a radio with me at the time and I put it down and just started listening to music working away. I was trying to take out some of the dead wood and areas that had got termites and things like that in it. Those things can be nightmares. You need to make sure that all the support beams are actually still solid. Obviously, we didn't want to renovate something dangerously because that would be a nightmare for our job. I do notice that the radio channel keeps on changing, and I think that's odd. I keep going to turn it on to the right one again, but I repeat this process a few more times before realising it's one of the guys. I go down and say, hey, can you just leave one channel on please? I don't want to listen to the rubbish you guys like. But no one replies. They all just look at me and say no one's changed it. I can tell by their expressions that they're actually being honest this time. So I just go back and turn off the thing. I start working again. I don't like insects, so I'm trying to do this quite quick and unfocused. I find that if I'm very focused on my job, then nobody else is actually going to bother me and I don't worry about the things here like insects. But I do notice though the radio's on again. I hear what sounds like a voice. It sounds like a kid's channel because I thought I heard a child. So I go back to turn it off, then as my hand's about to touch it, it hovers for a second as I realise there's no light. This thing wasn't on. That's pretty creepy, I think. Maybe it's just bugging, so I take out the battery now. I head back up and start doing my work again. I got finished for the day, so I head back down. I then go back to the guys and all's as normal. We ended up going to get some really good food later that night, and we have a fire going somewhere, which is really beautiful. I think moments like that in life just make everything worth it. You know, just the peaceful aspects of it, being out there in the nature and just really being able to relax. I think it's really beautiful. So we go back again the next day and I'm still in there. I'm working downstairs this time. I've closed off the thing that leads upstairs. I thought if there's any insects or things like that, they'll just be trapped up there. Probably not because there was quite a big gap in it, but I'm not really thinking like that. I wait a while and continue working before I hear something. I hear laughter of kids. I think it's in the radio which I've left upstairs, but I didn't really want to go up there, so I just try and ignore it. Then I can hear running around now, and what sounds like children playing. I was convinced it was the guys up there in the radio, so I thought, well, they're probably doing work I didn't know about. I don't know why they would have closed the latch on me, but that's fine. So I'm still working there, and I go up finally to try and turn off the radio, but I can't see it there, which I think is quite odd. I go down now, and the other guys have went off for something, and it's just me there alone. I'm here for a while and just start wandering around, waiting for them to return. We had a deal where if we have to go out, we'll bring back lunch for the other guys, which was fine. I was getting pretty hungry now, so I was eagerly awaiting their return. Nobody returned for a while, except eventually I see somebody turn up. Strangely, my eyes went blurry again just a second before it like happened before. Or should I say the frame rate dropping in my head, whatever it is. That's when a person pulls up. You can see that he's been hiking basically. I talk to him and he says, hey. We talk for a little while and I said, what do you do here? He said, well, I'm just a native here. I absolutely love the area. I just well and truly can't get enough of it. Something about this place really helps me find peace in my heart and I just feel like everything's good here. I tell him that I understand and explain that I'm not actually from here. I'm from a little bit further away, but I was just here for the temporary moments that I was doing the job. I then ask him about some of the history of the place and he says, well, do you know where you are? I say, yeah, and I explain, but he says, no, in this building. I say no. He said, yeah, that building, there used to be kids playing there. It used to be a school many years ago and a small one. When I hear that, all of the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. You said school? He said, yeah. I said, you gotta be kidding me. I thought I heard children running around upstairs, he said. Oh, that would explain it then. We have a bit more small talk for not too much longer and he goes off on his way. As he does so, I can't stop staring at him. So you're joking, I think. That place is haunted and I didn't realise. It's pretty creepy, but I decided not to tell the others. I mean, we're not going to be working here for too much longer. So that was completely fine. Now a few months passed and we ended up moving on. Now at about the same time, unfortunately, I had somebody in my family pass away. It's somebody that I was very close to and I felt quite upset because of this. Now, I remembered that I fell asleep one night. Now I'm just telling you this because I don't know if it was somehow related to what happened. But as I wake up, I need to use the bathroom, so I get up to go and do that. And that's when I hear it. Some kind of clicking sound. Odd, I don't know what it is, but I turn around and open the door, and there's a beam of light there. It was blue in colour, and just stood at about 5 feet tall or something. It was really odd. I was so scared of this thing. I rubbed my eyes to see if this was actually real, and unfortunately for me, that thing was as broad as daylight. After about 4 seconds, I slammed the door shut. I don't know what this is, but I'm petrified now. I just keep saying to myself over and over again, just please go away, please go away, please go away, please go away. I'm absolutely horrified now, not sure what to do. I ended up staying in here for a good 10 minutes before eventually I decide that I have to go out there. I have to get back into the world. I open the door and I can see it, wherever this light is. It's now moving, not very quick, but quick enough for me to notice it. And it's slowly but surely going further down the stairs. I think to myself, what is this? I'm still just as scared, but it's not following me now, so I feel a lot more safe. It now goes further and further away. Eventually, I see this thing and it goes into my backyard. I can't believe it. This time it looks different in colour, more like a dark purple or light blue. Then, it suddenly vanishes like it shot up out of absolutely nowhere and vanishes. I'm completely dumbstruck by this and I don't know what to think. I didn't wake up anybody else in the house because I didn't want to scare them, but surely somebody else saw it or heard it. I think I was so exhausted from the experience I just get back into my bed and go to sleep. I feel like this is the safest place for me. I can just stay here and let these things pass away. I didn't sleep very well and nobody else in my family seems to have experienced it as well. I was the only one. Pretty scary. But now we've got more work to do and we haven't quite finished here. So we have to get back to that job again. We're doing some more renovating now, but it's mostly building at this point, so I prefer this, to be honest. I didn't want to go back into that cabin because it truly scared me last time. I didn't want the guys to know that I was scared too, and eventually one of the other guys ended up finishing that job for us. So now it should be pretty clean sailing. Everything's nice and peaceful, just how I like it. So we're doing some more building work this time when I do notice something rather odd about where we are. There's rocks everywhere in a certain shape. Weirdly, they seem to have some kind of markings on them, but I can't figure out what they are. Now again, my vision goes odd when I discovered this. It's like my head starts shaking back and forth or left to right. And I would almost see some kind of heat waves every so often. It only seems to be in this area though. It was like, for whatever reason, there was some kind of force or something trying to stop me from exploring or investigating whatever this is. Now again, can't figure out exactly what this is. The best way I can describe it is like, you're kind of standing near a hot spring or something, And you know where you've got the little heat areas, but not with the water vapor yet, but you can see it's affecting the way you see things, and light diffracts. It was like that. Really weird. I wonder if it is actually hot, so I put my hand near, but I can't really feel much of anything. That was very weird to me. It was like something I couldn't really explain, and I do start to get worried that something's wrong with me, or my vision. I've decided that I've got to turn back now and try and find some of the others. Now again, I really think that if I can explain what I've seen to some of the others, and somebody else can see this with me, then we're going to feel good. I'm going to feel normal, and I haven't got to worry so much. For some reason, walking back, I felt very heavy. It's like I could only focus clearly on the things in front of me, and I'm kind of bouncing off the trees a bit. It's not good. I think it's the heat. I felt like my legs are heavy, and I can hear voices as I'm walking. Really strange. I can't make out words. It sounds like it's some kind of language which I can't understand, but it was really creepy. I get back and some of the guys are really upset. They ask what's wrong, and it turns out one of the pet dogs there has just died unexplainably. It looked really creepy because it looked like all of the blood had drained out of it, but there was no blood to be found. One of my friends then screams. He says, "Look," and just poking out from behind a tree is a dark figure. I don't really know how to describe the shape, but if you've ever seen Darth Maul in Star Wars, it was kind of like that. It was really creepy. I decide that I'm going to tell them about whatever I've seen. Now, this is when things got weird. I kind of fell backwards and I'm just laying down looking up at the trees. I feel really hot and come across all sweaty, and I'm looking back. The next thing I know, the trees are moving now. It felt really strange. I can't figure out what's happening, but for some reason being laid back like that felt quite nice and peaceful. Now eventually I come round again and I realise that the guys are carrying me. It seems like I've had some kind of heat stroke or something, and they're taking me to get checked out at the hospital. I ended up sleeping for a while. I don't know why I was so tired, and I wake up with an awful headache. Luckily for me, the waiting time wasn't too bad in that area, so basically they just get me around and I'm able to get seen very quickly. But now there's no explanation to what happened. Everything, including my blood work, comes back normally, so they think it is just a one-off thing, but to keep an eye on it. Oh great, what was that? The guys gave me a few days off then. I was really grateful for that. I think the time off helped me reset. I remembered falling asleep, then waking up, feeling like I was laying down again, staring up at the trees. Everything looks really bright now, and it's weird. But I had these weird dreams. I remember one that really creeps me out was I woke up, and there was some kind of thing there. I know this thing wasn't very good. It was more like a demon, I guess, and it told me to come with it. It was like it communicated telepathically with me because I just knew what it said without really hearing anything. And then it showed me all of my worst fears. I've actually heard about this happening to other people as well, but my god, it was creepy. Wow, I mean, it just showed me everything I didn't want to see, and then just calmly put me back like nothing had happened. I woke up and felt really weird after this, knowing that I needed to at least get back to work and back to civilization, so that's what I did. I come back to work and I ask the guys how things have been, and they're a bit quiet. I say, "What's up?" One of the guys then speaks out and says, "Yeah, we kept seeing something. I don't know what it is, but there was some kind of little thing that seems to be following us." I said, "Are you sure it's not an animal?" And they said, "No, it just looks completely different. It definitely can't be an animal. So what is it then?" I said. Alas, I get no answer. Great. This is creeping me out. So we get back to work and things are like normal for a while. We finally finish up there and we're all really relieved. We go out to grab some beers to celebrate and to mourn the loss of our animal. It really hurt one of my friends, so I really felt for him. But I remembered for a few nights I kept having a dream again that I was laid down looking up at all of the trees slowly spinning. It's really weird. It's like I was laid on my back being carried around throughout something. Then I had another dream which connected everything. I'm at those stones again. I can see the markings more clearly now, but I never really figure out what it says. It was like I was reliving that one moment and event over and over again, but I don't know why. More than likely it's just because it was what was going on in my head at that time, but it's definitely freaked me out a lot. I mean, it's not a good thing to have to experience, and I hope that nobody listening here has to experience anything like that. It's such a creepy feeling. It really feels like you're being dragged away from reality. Really odd. And every so often I would have a dream like I was at the perspective of a dog or something, just kind of rushing along through the forest. It seems to be the same area as where we're working, but I can never be 100% sure of this. But that's fine. Just a little bit of a creepy one, I guess. Even in these dreams I would have the blurred vision, though that was definitely odd. To be fair, it actually put my mind at peace though. It felt like, I don't know, it made sense of what was happening. So now, I wake up again and all is normal. We're going to quite a big site now. We have to clear a few trees in this area, and luckily they've actually provided somewhere for us to stay. It was quite an old house that was no longer being used by a family, and it was bought by a company not too long ago, and they said we could stay there. So I get over there, put my things down, and start to do some work. I had to pretty much do some more surveying and stuff. Again, it's not very fun, but I just make it like home and just start to do my job. Now we had to sleep in bunk beds here, which I didn't mind. That was fine. There have been reports apparently of some kind of strange noises in the night before by other workers, but you know, that's just what people do to try and scare each other, isn't it? There wasn't too much to make from this. I kind of didn't care. I was just happy to be there. It was better than where we had slept on other sites, so I didn't have too much of an issue. So I make it home for the meantime. That's when the first weird things started happening. One of the guys that we were working with kept on telling us to knock it off in the night time. He'd say, "Hey, come on, cut it out, we really need to sleep now." None of us said anything, we just presumed that he was talking in his sleep or something. You know, just normal stuff and nothing to be too worried about. So we all go to sleep again. Eventually we ask him about it and say, "Do you know how much you sleep talk?" He says, "Sleep talk? I never sleep talk. I was awake, one of you was touching my leg." We all say, "Nah, you're just making this up." He says, "No, come on, just stop. Admit it, who did it?" We said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Look," and he showed us on his leg and he's got some scratches on it. Wow, they looked a bit nasty. We then think it's a rat or something and set up a few different rodent traps. This did stop it for a while, but the traps actually never went off, so that was different. Yeah, I wasn't really sure about that one. We think maybe he's just scratching it in the night in his sleep, then blaming us for it. But that was that really. Eventually he went off to another site and we just forgot about it basically. Things are going well, but then eventually one of my other colleagues has to sleep in his bunk. I'm actually a bit higher up now, so I feel alright. I feel safer up high for some reason. Even if worse comes to worse, I feel like I can just jump on a person if they try and rob us or something, so that's fine. None of the robbers are getting us, or killers, or whoever there is. It's just something I've been paranoid about for a while for no reason, but hey. So, we get back to our job and things are like normal, but then I wake up and I see something. Just out of the corner of my eye, I think it's a rat. I get up quickly and go to make some noise, but I ended up stopping myself knowing that, well, if it is there, if I make any sounds it's not going to run off. It's just going to probably either come towards me, which I don't want, or it's going to go into a trap if I'm quiet enough, so that's what I aim for. So I stay completely quiet. My eyes aren't very good now because I've just woke up, so I have to take a few seconds to adjust to that. I've got night vision though, which is good, so I can see alright. Then Eventually I see it coming up to the bunk. Oh my god, it's gonna come up here. It's gonna come up here as I see it approach where the ladder is. But then it crawls over, going up to my colleague's leg and starts scratching it. I then realise that this isn't a rodent. I don't know what this is. It kind of looked like a weird small thing hunched over. My heart is increasing literally every second now, as I see something moving. I don't know what this is. There's some kind of thing which is slowly scratching my friend's leg. This goes on for a little bit and I'm screaming inside knowing that if he wakes up he's going to be scared. And I don't know what that thing is. I'm scared to fight it. This keeps happening now. Scarily, this actually goes on for probably another 20 minutes. I think, God, why don't you just wake up? I look around to see if anybody else is up, but nobody else is. This thing keeps going, and then goes over to the other side of the room. It keeps on and on scratching now onto the door. I think surely this has got to have woken up somebody, right? But again, nothing. I think how on earth has nobody woke up to this? It's really creeped me out though. It seems to vanish under the door, which was also really freaking weird. I then wake up, and it's sunlight now. My friend wakes up, and you can see that his leg's actually got a bit of blood on the sheet. He keeps washing it, saying, God, I think the rat come. I then say what I saw, and my other friend looks at me weird and said, yeah, I saw the same thing. I say, what was it? Because he was closer than I would have been. He says, I don't know. It's not like anything I've ever seen before. I then asked if he saw it leave, and he said, yeah, it just kind of vanished at the door. And that's what I heard too, until we then look at the door, and weirdly there's no scratch marks, just on my friend's leg. We don't know what this was, but we decide it's time to leave. We pack up all of the gear, and we decide to get a hotel. It's a bit of a drive away, but it's a lot safer than that place. Now years have gone by, and to this day I have no idea what that creature was. I have found out a bit later down the line that apparently what I saw might have been some kind of ancient burial ground. I have a feeling that I disturbed something I shouldn't have, and that maybe it followed us, but I don't know. I don't know what any of this was, and I don't like it. I'd worked in my job for about 10 years and I really enjoyed it. Though eventually I did kind of get tired of seeing the same things. Now some of my friends said, oh, maybe you should get a different job and not work as the park ranger that I had for so long. But I don't know, there was something about it that I just couldn't seem to go away from. I wouldn't say I was necessarily drawn to work in the forest, but it just kind of connected with my soul. And I'd done it for a number of years afterwards. I'd like to share some weird things that happened to me with you guys, because I think it's important that other people know about them. Now the woods are pretty big, and we don't really know too much about what's out there. Now keeping that in mind, I'm open to the possibility that some of what happened to me was just done by weird people, but at the same time, I'm not really so sure. Now this particular event happened when I was relatively isolated too. I was basically patrolling somewhere, and I eventually got moved to go and inspect a cabin. The cabin was fine and we knew that. I just needed to stay there for a couple of days just to complete all of my checks. Now, this is something I thoroughly look forward to. It meant I could read and drink my coffee and just bring a few newspapers up there with me and just have a nice time being there on my own. I'm one of those people where it takes a few days of getting away before my mind completely opens and gets off of the tasks and things that are around me. I was having a hard time escaping from some of the stresses of life. I was staying strong and getting on with things, but I was going full speed ahead and not really taking any time for myself to sort things. so I could really do with this break. Some of my other friends at work there said they found the same thing too, but they did report feeling weird when they were out in the cabin. They said that they had the feelings of being watched. I didn't really take much notice of this because obviously, if you're out there in the woods, these feelings can come across very quickly. So it wasn't anything to be surprised about really. I don't know. When you'd worked out there for a number of years, I guess you kind of got used to it all, so I wasn't really fazed. So, I look forward to my journey. I remembered that on my last night before heading out there, things were pretty good, and some of the other guys there were just having a few jokes with me, trying to put me off the whole thing. They said, you know, there's Sasquatches out there. You heard about the bears that can come out of the trees and things like that, just joking. I didn't let it bother me though, and I said my goodbyes and set out. I remembered going home that day. I felt pretty comfortable and happy knowing that there was good things ahead of me. To be honest, my thinking was getting a little bit more negative at the time and I needed to get away. I won't go into too many details about things that was happening, but you could say it wasn't the greatest time of my life around now. I was using work as an escape really, which isn't the best of things, and yeah, everything worked out exactly the way that I wanted to. I'm now married with my wife and have a small boy on the way, and I'm really excited about this. I got another job that I absolutely love, just at the time those things seem far away. When I get home I make sure that I packed up all of my coffee and everything else that I could need for this. I didn't have to bring that many things with me. I had some cookies and other supplies and snacks. You do get the supplies out there, but they're kind of more like military rations or MREs if you call them that. So I wanted to bring some other sugary things to make this more exciting. The cabin actually has a fridge and it's relatively well stocked, but sometimes the fridge will go out, and that's going to be annoying because you're going to have a very hungry few day tenor there, which I was trying to avoid happening to me. I remember driving over from the gas station. I actually took the wrong turn and go back to the normal place that I work, forgetting instinctively that I was supposed to be in the cabin, and I turn around. One of the rangers waves me away and pretended that he was saluting me like I was going on a military mission I wasn't coming back from. I did it back. I didn't really think much of it. As I'm driving, the trees are providing some very nice shade from the intense sunshine. Now it is one of those summers where the sky was beautifully clear, and it makes beautiful shaded areas in the forest. It was such a beautiful place to be. I really recommend anybody that hasn't been out there before to try it, because I think it's great. So I continue on my drive and there's some insects that are getting into my little truck, and this is annoying. One of them I couldn't get out for the life of me. I'm not sure whether it is a mosquito or what because I was concentrating on the road, but God was it annoying. I actually had my shirt off trying to bat it, but then I realised that I couldn't put my shirt back on again, and it was actually quite funny. Nobody really knows about this. This is the first time I've told people about this specific detail. Now, eventually I managed to get to where I have to park up and I dismount. I still don't know what insect had actually got into my truck. I just figure out that hopefully, after a couple of days of being locked in there, it will die. Or worse, it will have children, then I've got a new problem. But I'll worry about it later. So I get my box of things and everything and I start walking down there. Now again, the trees are absolutely wonderful. I feel really at peace and happy. This almost like every direction that I look in, there's nature all around me. And I couldn't feel more happy. I'm honestly beaming at this point. You can see the high rock formations all around me and it looks incredible. It honestly looks like it's something out of a film. And I'll take my way across a bridge with a stream that once ran. Closer to the winter months there'll actually be more water through this, but it's just become so dry that there's nothing there. Sometimes I wonder how the trees stay so strong and lavish, but they do. Now, after probably about 2 hours of hiking and seeing lots of dragonflies and other beautiful insects, I eventually make it to the cabin, and it looks pretty dusty. It looks like it's been coated by a sandstorm or something. It's a bit annoying because it means the other people that were there before didn't actually make any effort or progress to clean it off, and I find that quite annoying. It doesn't take any effort whatsoever for people to be courteous to each other and to make our lives easier, but hey, here I am. Now, I remember the first weird thing I saw is a turtle shell. There are no turtles that should be around here, but why is there a shell here? I thought maybe one of the other workers or hikers had left it here, but I don't know. Seems pretty weird. It was hollowed out too, which was especially strange. No skeleton or anything. So, I put the key in the door, put my things down and make my way inside. And I met with a beautiful smell of coffee. Not bad coffee, but some unopened ones that people have left around, and other little presents for me to find. This makes me very happy, and I start boiling the kettle. Now there's something wrong with the kettle and it seems to constantly boil, and I go to turn it off. As I turn around, I think I can see something in my peripheral vision, but as I look there I can see nothing. I presume that it was just my eyes adjusting from the bright going into the dark, and I don't think much of it. Though this time I'm a little bit more scared, and I decide to close the door behind me. I met with a feeling of peace, and the cabin's really nice. It's quite basic, but you have like a toilet area, a little kitchen area, and an area to sleep. It's kind of like a studio design, if you were imagining a modern apartment, where you've got one area sectioned off and everything else is in the same room. I don't have an issue with this though. I knew there wasn't that much water, so I have to really try and ration it. I don't have a clue when they last filled up the tank, and I don't want to be the person that gets left short of showers and things like that. Especially because of how hot it is out here, it can become really overwhelming very quickly, and I'm trying to avoid this. So I'm really having a great time at first. I decide to make some food and open up one of the MREs. After this, I drink my coffee and I have my cookies and I'm just relaxing. I know that I'm going to need lots of energy because I have lots of different areas to check. It's nothing too much, I just have to make sure that paths can still be travelled on and stuff like that. So I set out and do this. There's a really beautiful cool air as I set out, and it makes me feel quite at home. As I step out, I do realise that I can see something up ahead of me. It's on one of the paths that I have to make sure is clear, and I can see it's a little bit overgrown, but I guess that's kind of normal. Basically, as long as I could get through okay, it would be a pass. If not, I would have to try and clear it out myself or make a note of it so people could come out and clear it. I actually have a shovel with me and I want to attempt to fix some of this myself. Now, as I make my way through, I come up to a large tree that looks like it's covered in moss, but it's something slightly different. I'm distracted by this as I see something further. It looks like the silhouette of a person standing there. I don't think too much and think maybe, well, it's probably a hiker out here. I decide not to disturb or scare them. I think maybe if they see my shovel they might think it's a weapon or something from afar and become scared, so I don't make too much sound and just continue. I've decided that I should go around the path away from them so they don't really get spooked, and that's what I do. Now, eventually I have to loop back round and I get to the other area that I need to check out. I go across another little path which takes me over a stream that once flowed. It looks really pretty once more. I then realise that I can still see the silhouette. I do think this is particularly strange because it doesn't seem to have moved. I'm not sure whether somebody's left a jacket there, and I decide to investigate. I follow up some steps, and I keep staring at this thing, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Now, as I'm approaching, I'm feeling completely relaxed. I think it's just the environment and not really taking too many notes of the situation, but I was maybe too cautious and free and think that I probably should have had a better approach to this as I get closer. I can see something staring at me now. I say something because I can tell it's not a person, but it was pretty weird. It looks like a black sheet with some kind of mask up on it. I can now see that it's a hood. It's not a hoodie, but it's kind of flowing down. And I can see the base of it as a tree. Somebody's left some kind of drape over this tree, and it doesn't look normal. I get closer and closer, and I presume that somebody's left a tent up here. I think it's weird because it's black, and I think, why would you want a black tent? You're honestly going to get scalderingly hot. This is certainly not the kind of tent you want out here. And I then have to start making my way off of the path. I'm a little bit annoyed about this because it starts messing up my uniform, which I really enjoy keeping pristine. I do, however, eventually make it over to the back of it and go to grab it and pull it down, but it's on there pretty tight. I then take a step to the side and I can see a skull. I don't know what kind of animal skull this is, but it kind of looked like the Halloween scream mask that you see every October, but almost like a makeshift home one. This is pretty bizarre. I eventually pull and I'm able to tear this thing down. I go to touch the part of the skull that's on top of the tree stump, but I decide I should probably leave it there. As my hands are probably an inch away from it, I just hesitate. I don't know, it just felt weird. I look this thing in where its eyes would have been for a second and I get the creepies. I realise that I can probably just kick this down though, so I use my force and I'm able to make the tree come down. And I'm quite happy. It was probably about 5 feet up in the air, the stump of this tree. And I'm glad that I don't have to see it anymore. The last thing I want to do is forget it's there, then have an absolutely horrifying moment as I make eye contact with this thing again in the dead of night or something. But that's pretty weird. That shouldn't really be there. I presume that maybe somebody's done it for Halloween, but this is in nowhere near to October. I don't know, maybe it's been there for a while, but I think this is odd. I take a few looks around and I can't see anybody or anything else. I just remembered that my hands felt very sticky too. It was almost like tree sapling, but somewhat different. It wasn't like this thing was glued up here, but it was certainly odd. I look around in all directions, trying to see if anything else is out here, but I can't see anything now. I don't think there's anybody hiding away too, but I do really think this is especially weird. It's the first time in my career actually that I've ever encountered something weird to this degree. I decide it's probably nothing and say to myself aloud, come on, you're the ranger here, let's get on with it. And I continue about my way. I go up some steps and start clearing another path. I start shoveling, and as I'm doing so, dirt is getting stuck to my hands because of whatever kind of sticky substance is on that rope thing that I pulled down, or that tent. It's actually quite disgusting. I'm usually not that creeped out by things like this, but it really makes me feel weird. I decide that I should probably head back now, and I start doing so. Now I'm not really proud of this, but I actually didn't do some of the surveying and clearing I was supposed to do for the rest of the day. I don't know, it was almost like something clicked in my head and I just couldn't do it. I kind of gone transitioning from being in the moment to being a little bit more cautious of everything, almost thinking more in philosophy about why was this here, what could it have meant. I head back and put the shovel down outside and I go in and start washing my hands. I really struggled to get this stuff off, but I'm eventually able to do so. Then I noticed annoyingly that I've used up quite a lot of my water to do this. I decide that I should wrap up my shovel in bandage so that way I don't have to touch it again, and make sure that I wear gloves if I investigate anything similar. So I actually use the rest of the evening just to listen to music on the radio and try and relax. There was something about hearing that voice in the cabin that really calmed me down. I actually have the door open now because it's so hot, and I just relaxed really. Yeah, I had more of a job to do, but in this moment I was a little frightened really. This goes on for the rest of the evening, and eventually it's time to get some sleep. I close the door, have the bandage on the shovel now, leaving it ajar to the door, and go out. I take one last scan of the perimeter and head back in again. I put my stuff to the side and decide to keep a knife near where I'm sleeping now. It's something I've actually never done before, and I realise why it's a stupid idea when I woke up the following morning and I nearly stabbed myself. Funnily enough, it's not far away from my neck, and I thought, wouldn't that be funny if I ended up getting myself like that? I radio in my findings from the following day, and I actually lied about what had happened and just said everything was normal, and I make myself another cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is kind of like my morning debrief with myself, where I plan out what I need to do for the following day, what I could do differently and what I could do better. And for today, it's to not get freaked out so easily by small things. That's what I say to myself. I do some positive affirmations and I get ready to head out again. Now what's weird about this morning is that there's kind of a mist that's settled. It's not fog, but almost like a morning dew. But I haven't seen it out here before, and it makes the whole place seem a little bit Halloweeny and scary. I go to look for the shovel, and I can't find it. I look exactly where I placed it the following night, and I realise that it's nowhere to be found. No issues though. I probably simply misplaced it, I say to myself. I press on now, looking all over for this thing, but I can't seem to locate it. Okay, that's certainly weird. Again, I don't think too much of it and presume that, I was tired. I probably just forgot it somewhere. And I head out. Now I have to go about 40 minutes away from where I am now to do this further maintenance work, and I go into a really beautiful area where the trees are tall and quite skinny. That has its advantages because I have quite a good horizon here, and if there is anything or anyone, I'm gonna be able to see them now. The trees are actually really tall. I think they're probably about 50 or 60 feet or even taller. It's really cool. Don't know how many years I've been here, but I really like it. Now the mist eventually goes and I feel a lot more confident being out here on my own. I have my coffee with me, but where it started to become more summery and hot as the days progressed and the trees aren't as thick here, I'm quite hot and start to overheat a little bit, so I resort to just sipping it slowly. I'm sweating quite a lot now. I don't feel like I need the energy though, I just like the taste of the coffee. So I continue this walk and eventually find a tree that's fallen down onto the path. It's not too big, but I should be able to clear it. I don't have the shovel, but I ended up using a big stick and I'm kind of able to plant it underneath and using the end of it to tether it out of the way. It only moves about a foot at a time, but my god is it loud. It sounds like a whole tree's fell, and it made me jump at first. I don't know how my stick hasn't snapped, but I continue this process when I hear something. There's kind of like the sound of rain, or maybe like lots of cups being thrown at something. That's the only way that I can describe it. Or maybe like someone was shooting ping pong balls off of the trees. It was weird. I thought maybe for a second I set off a chain reaction or something and some other trees were going down elsewhere, but I can't see anything. Everything is impossibly still for the sounds that I'm hearing, and that's especially bizarre. Now, I scour the area for as long as I can. I even go off onto the tree that I've just knocked down to get a better viewpoint, but I can't see anything at all. This happens for about 4 minutes before slowly fading out, similar to how the sounds of rain slowly go off into the distance as the clouds go away. But that was especially weird. I'm very drawn in to where the sound was coming from, and it's further up the path, so I now head up this way. I have my stick with me still because I knew it was strong. I say it was in case there was more trees to clear, but I was a little concerned now. As I'm walking, I see movement now up the hill through the trees again. It's weird, it almost looked like something was kind of floating through the trees. I can't really tell because how far away it was, but it looked like something quite big was kind of moving through them freely. Almost like it wasn't interacting with the trees, but more just the ground on the floor. Almost like it was in another dimension. I walk as quick as I can trying to get closer to whatever this is, but I seem to get further and further away. And that's when I stop. I'm drawn to the ground as I notice something. I think my brain realised something shouldn't have been there, and what do I see? The carcass of a deer. Now, it's not really the carcass, more the bones. But only the bones. It's almost like this was dipped in some kind of acid or something, because there's nothing else around it. I can't see any flesh, I can't see any blood, just a deer carcass somewhat perfectly in the middle of the path. I start searching now, trying to see if there's any other signs of anything or anyone that could have made this, but there's nothing. I look further and further, trying to see if there's anything similar, but again, I don't see anything. Annoyingly, it's my job now to move it out of the path, and I don't want to do this. I ended up prodding it with a stick for a while, probably about 10 times before I'm brave enough to actually just grab it and move it piece by piece off into the trees and the bushes. Now that was really weird. I remembered when I felt it too, it felt kind of chalky almost. Like too dry, like bone dry, but even more so. I don't know how else to describe it. The only thing that was making it wet is my hands that are sweating. I'm not sure if this is from the situation or just because of how hot it is, but I'm suddenly no longer feeling the urge to investigate further. I continue my surveying this time, and I realise that I forgot my stick. I look around and again, that was nowhere in sight, which is weird because I was sure that I left it next to me when moving the bones. Now eventually I come up to another clearing, and all is well now. I feel a lot better in this open space, just knowing what's going on around me. I finished the job for the day too, so that's a good sign that I can head back now and try and get back to some relative safety. So I turn away and start heading back in the direction and the path that I've just walked upon. Now I get back and I'm at the point where I found the bones, but I can't see them. I think maybe they've sunk down into the ground a little bit, but that's quite weird. I should still be able to see the bones, especially because of how white they are. It should stand out from the background, but they're not there. I just think it's a good thing that it doesn't have to scare anyone else, and I think, well, maybe some kind of animals wanted them for God knows what, and I start to head back. Now the hike back felt probably twice as long, which is another weird observation. Usually I know exactly how long I've been out for, but I check my watch and I have been walking for the same amount of time, and it feels dreadfully long. I'm also quite tired. I go back into my cabin and close the door, and I fell asleep pretty quickly. Actually so quickly that I didn't even eat or shower or anything. I just woke up the following day about an hour before my alarm. So I eat, I get ready and radio in. And I say this time that I did find some animal remains, but nothing out of the ordinary, and that I've cleared it. They say, Mikey, great, good job, keep it up, not long now. I say thanks, and end the call. To be honest, I was relatively frustrated at this point because I've not really had the relaxing time that I'd anticipated, but I've still got a couple more days left, so that can come soon. So I get my things together, get ready, eat some donuts this time, which are actually on the turn. They don't taste that nice, but give me the sugar that I need to head out, and I do some extra work. Now, as I set out this time, I have to survey another area and make sure that there's been no fires here or anything. Apparently this particular area is quite susceptible to having forest fires, and we just have to make sure that there's nothing that could potentially be causing it. It could be trash that people have left behind, or illegal dumping. Believe it or not, people will actually dump things out here. How they get this far out, I don't know, but they'll bury things. But the problem is, it makes methane and other gases that are very combustible, and we have fires that are deep out here and quite hard to tackle. So I'm walking down the path, and in this area the trees are also quite long and thin, but the good thing about it is that it lets you see miles around almost, or at least 500 meters in any direction, so I'm feeling safe now. To be honest, it's quite overgrown again, and a lot of the bushes probably come up to half of my height. It's okay, it just makes it a little bit uncomfortable to trek through, but that's fine. Now, I get to the area that I need to survey, and I can't see anything there out of the ordinary. I do notice how the trees have suddenly got much darker now, and it almost looks like nightfall in this particular area. But that's not an issue, it just means that it's going to be a lot more cooler there, and it's going to be a lot nicer for me. So, on my go, much more braver than the last couple of days now, and I feel comfortable. So I'm mostly done now, and I take a few rests. I'm drinking water, and my canteen's actually running a little bit low. Normally this means I should just head back because dehydration is going to be really dangerous out here. But I continue onwards. I see a beautiful bird in this moment that I haven't seen before, and it distracts me from everything. I've never seen this kind before. It almost looks like a green parrot, but it's a little bit different. I notice it's interesting because in all my years of working there I've never seen it before, but that's fine. Now, I take a seat and I look up and notice something odd. It kind of looks like an owl at the top of a tree. It's quite high up, but it's a very weird shape. It almost looks like a dinosaur to me, and I think it's odd. I can also see partly through it, which I think is really bizarre. It's probably about 100 meters away, and really difficult to spot, but I do. I get out my binoculars, and I can't really focus on it that well. I know it's a bird, but it's really difficult to see exactly what kind of bird, and curiosity gets the better of me. When I was younger, I used to love going bird watching and looking out for animals like this, so I decided that I should investigate. The good thing is, it's on the path that I'm on, so I basically just have to follow it in a straight line to get to it, and that's exactly what I do. Now I get closer and closer, until I realise something odd. This is no bird, at least not no living one. Whatever this is, has died up there, and I'm looking at the bones. But again, there's no flesh at this, there's no blood, there's nothing. What only appears to be the skull and a few bones of something up the tree. How it was all held together, I'll never know, but I think this is really weird. I take out the binoculars and look even closer this time, and I soon realise that what I'm looking at looks identical to the remains that I'd found before. Now that's really odd. How on earth any animal or anything could have got up there is beyond me. It almost looks like you'd need a drone or helicopter to take it up there. It's really creepy to see. It wasn't moving though, it almost looked like the head of a totem pole, with how perfectly it was stuck there. Wait, wow, am I getting scared now? I almost felt like I was in something's area and land, and it being up there was a sign that I wasn't supposed to be here. I try and mark down the exact location where I am, but I can't be too sure because I'm a little worried now. I decide to just forget about it and continue on the path and do the last parts of my surveying. I did these very quickly this time, and nothing out of the ordinary up here. I take a few seconds before I can actually turn around because I don't want to. I'm expecting to see something standing on the path staring dead at me in my eyes, but I have to be brave and turn back. I don't want to be stuck out here as nightfall comes. I turn around and there's nothing. I breathe out a deep sigh of relief and I start on the path and make my way forward. Now, I look towards where the tree is and it's still up there. It hasn't moved an inch, but I feel like my mind has miles away from the situation. I actually couldn't look at it other than that quick glance. I resorted to jogging past where the tree is. It's probably about 6 feet off of the trail, but I can't be sure again because I didn't take long enough to figure out exactly how close it was. I ended up jogging until I realised I have to stop because my eyes are starting to go a bit weird. Now, I start walking and I get to the other area where I can finish off my job for the day. The good thing about being out here usually is that you can finish the day pretty early most days and do what you want afterwards, but for me in this situation it wasn't a good thing. I'm walking as I notice some leaves fall and I get back to my cabin. Now back to my sanction and safety. It's the most relieved I've ever been to get back there in the time that I've been out. I decide that I need a sheltered day. I get in, I lock the door, close all the windows, and just have a relax. I fell asleep for about 2 or 3 hours and wake up again. I'm very dehydrated. I realise that after I'd been to the toilet and start drinking lots of water. I have a cold shower now to try and wake myself up. I finished writing up the reports of my day and findings. I actually decided to include it this time too. I thought something definitely wasn't adding up here, and it could have been chance that all these animal remains were out here, but I think it's very weird how there was no flesh and blood on any of it. I don't know what kind of animal or creature could be capable of that, but I know it certainly wasn't a hunter, because A, they're not allowed out here, and B, how on earth could they have possibly got it up there without us realising? I don't know. But I guess I don't really want to know. I remembered that I couldn't even focus on reading, which was my attempt at getaways in situations like this. I just stare at pictures of some of the couple of days old newspapers. I'm not really sure what to do. Funnily enough, I actually started doing a crossword and it calmed me down a lot. I think probably all of my brain was being used. Probably the parts that aren't normally used from being in dangerous situations, and it made me fly through that thing. Or maybe it was a distraction of it all, and escaping, I don't know. But I eventually drift off asleep. I wake up again and the sunlight hits my face, almost aggressively, and I wake up once more before my alarm clock. Usually this would never happen unless I was stressed out about something or if I had something important the following day. I eventually round my energy up and make my way out of bed and quickly get all of my food in me and showered off, and I get ready for my day. My alarm clock then goes off almost in time with when I get a call from the radio. Now it was just a normal call. They're basically just asking how I'm doing, and I explain what's been going on. They actually take this quite seriously, and they're worried about illegal hunters in the area. But I explain, I don't think this is illegal hunters. I really think this is odd because there's no blood or anything. They also agree that this is a particularly weird detail of my endeavour out here so far, and they say just keep a note on it, and I start to get ready for my last day. I feel happy now and more confident knowing that my time here is now limited. So I head out and start my final day. Things are pretty normal and I almost feel like the air tastes different. Everything feels more peaceful and the usual sounds and surroundings seem to be as they were. Everything seemed a little bit too quiet for the last couple of days and I honestly forget about what had happened. I make my way up one of my trails and everything's lovely here. The trees are ones that I can see quite far along, and there's parts of them slowly falling down, and lots of plants are in blossom, and everything being in bloom makes it look so much nicer. The first weird thing I did see was a big spider on some parts of wood that I had to investigate and inspect, but it didn't jump on me, which is always a good thing, and it kept its distance, so I was happy. Now, I get towards the end of my day, and I'm feeling good. You know what I mentioned earlier about wanting to forget about all of the worries and stresses? That comes, and I have a really beautiful peace of mind moment where nothing bothers me. All of the stresses are gone, and I feel really happy out here. Now, I actually start to feel a little bit sad knowing that my adventure's soon going to be over, and I have to return back to the normal parts of my job. The aspect of being out here in the cabin away from everyone and everything doesn't come too often, so I take a few moments to try and appreciate it more. And the sun begins to set and I head in now. I've completed my tenor here and it's time for me to return in the morning. I start packing out all of my things so I can leave quickly and I head off to bed. Now I didn't fall asleep quickly and start doing another crossword. I actually think of trying to develop my own, then realise how boring I am, and eventually fall asleep. And I'm awoken. I hear the sound of knocking on the door. I say I'm gonna come, give me one moment, and start to find my things. They persist so, and I say louder, I'm coming, just give me a moment. It seems to go on constantly though, which I think is pretty weird. And it suddenly dawns on me, nobody's coming to relieve me. It's pretty late in the night time, and something's off. I get up, look out the window and can't see anybody. Still in a dazed state, I go outside and look around, and I think I can see somebody, but I'm not too sure. I presume that it's one of the other rangers there, and I say, hey, I'm gonna sleep a bit longer, let me just go to bed. And I go back in and fall asleep quite quickly. Now I'm woken up about 2 or 3 hours later by the same knocking. This time, my conscious brain slips in, and something doesn't add up. I realise nobody should be out here but me, and why would they be waking me up so early in the morning? I realise that was not a ranger who I thought I saw. I get up quickly, and the knocking this time really haunts me. I still have my clothes on from before, so I don't need to get changed at all. And I slowly peer out the window. As I do, I notice a deer standing up on its hind legs staring straight back at me. It doesn't look like a normal deer though. It looks terrifying and menacing, like something I've never seen before. No animal that I've known has ever been able to do this before in my life, so what on earth am I staring at? I then let out a gasp and this thing runs on all fours. It runs into the forest and kind of takes on almost a human shape and eventually gets off into the distance. I was stuck glued to that window staring for probably over an hour trying to see if it come back, and daylight now breaks. There's nothing there. It's just me alone in the woods. I think that I might have went into a state of shock after that, and I grab the things that I need and I start slowly making my way out towards where the back of the cabin is. I have to put something away, and as I'm doing so, I hear my name, Mike. Mikey, come here. Look, I need to show you something. It sounds just like the other ranger who I've been communicating through on the radio with. I say hello, then go to stop myself. This can't be Mikey. I then go back in and I radio in for Mikey, who answers. I say oh nothing and I'm coming back soon, and he says see you in a bit. I think maybe he was talking on the radio and I somehow left it on. I then go back out and start making my way through the forest. But then I hear it again. Help, please help. Mikey, I'm hurt, you've got to help me. That's when I realised something was way off. He wasn't out here in the woods. In fact, it's not physically possible he could have reached me here in this time. I then start to walk very quickly, and the voice, it goes away, but then it returns again, seeming to follow me. But this does not sound like a person though. It sounded like something trying to be a person. There were breaks in its voice and it just sounded off, where it would go deeper every so often. Mike, come here, please, I beg you. Followed by crying. The crying sounds followed me for probably another 7 minutes, until eventually I get further and further away from them, and I only hear weeping and the odd Mikey, sounding more and more desperate. I know for 100% fact it was not my buddy out there. This was something far worse and menacing. The relief I feel when I see my truck is something I can't describe. I throw everything in the back and slam the door. I don't know why I slammed it so loud. I think it was to let whatever was out there know that I was in safety now. And I start up and I make my way back. I eventually get back and I remembered the entire drive just feeling very weird, almost like I wasn't in my own body. I get into the station and guess what? My buddy's there. He was apparently calling out for me desperately in the woods. I say, hey, were you out there in the woods? And one of the other rangers looks at me weird. I say, I heard your voice in the woods calling out for me, but it wasn't you. I then start saying more of what happened, and one of the rangers who's a bit older looks at me and says, yeah, you encountered a skinwalker. I look at him like he's crazy, but he says, you know, they imitate voices. And for some reason I suddenly remembered the other detail, the weird looking deer thing I'd seen. I explained that I was very delirious and very tired and that I don't think it was anything, but he then explains that apparently this is exactly what they're supposed to look like. I then tell them that I'm never going back there again and that there were skulls out there that have to be investigated. He then says that he's going to send a few of the boys out there in a couple of weeks to figure it out. I say, weeks? Are you crazy? I say, they're going to be gone by then. He says, no, I'm not risking it, and looks very serious at me again. Now, it turns out that an investigation went out there to find the skulls, and you know what? They could never find a thing. Apparently some of the other rangers, when they're out there, heard other voices of who they thought were other rangers, even being myself, but apparently nobody was out there. Apparently the voices actually went on for the following months, before it wasn't heard again for the next 8 years, and eventually I left. Now, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that what I encountered was a skinwalker, but from how they described it and what I saw, I don't know what else it could have possibly been. Now, many years ago, my grandpa told me a story, and it's something that I've never been able to forget. My grandpa worked as a forest worker for quite a while. He would basically have to survey the area every so often and just try and keep it in its tip-top condition. It was a really beautiful place that he worked in, Now, I'd always remember this story that he told me again and again over different years. It was impossible to forget. Now, unfortunately, my grandpa passed away not too long ago. Now, one thing that I absolutely didn't realise is that he had an entire written account of everything that he had told me in his own words. So now, today, I'd like to share this story with you. Now, I'd like to give you some backstory about my grandpa first before I actually start. Now, he was someone who was a very good, hard-working, honest guy. You'd never have any issues with him. I mean, if you ever heard that he was in an argument or something, then you knew for absolute certain that the other guy was probably in the wrong. He's just that kind of person. I mean, virtually everybody knew him. He also had this fantastic ability to remain completely calm and not panic in different situations. There's a lot of different characteristics of which he had that I now possess myself, and that I'm grateful for being able to watch him have and to be able to then eventually implement myself. I mean, really, I don't think I was half the man that he was at my best, but I tried to be, but even half is enough. Now, my grandpa was also somebody that would absolutely never lie. He just didn't have it in him. I mean, in any situation, he just wouldn't lie about things. It's just not the kind of person that he was. He lived some life too. He was actually drafted into parts of different wars, and it must have been difficult for him. He never actually told us exactly what happened during the wars. I just knew that it had an impact on him. And now, this story actually occurred to him before the wars too, so that puts out any doubt that it was related to PTSD or something from them. I do feel sorry for him though. I've been lucky enough to live a life where I've never had to be drafted or have anything like that happen to me so far. So now let me begin. Now, growing up in the same area and remaining there virtually his whole life, my grandpa eventually come to inherit a family home, and it's one that he'd always been on, so he didn't really know much different from it. So I'll now take the story from him and tell you exactly what he had wrote down. The first time this happened was when I was quite young. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I remembered that all throughout our villages there were reports of something strange in the forest. Apparently, people would wake up and hear scratching or knocking on the windows, then go outside and not see anything. You know, something else weird was there was all kinds of lights in the sky not too long after this would happen. A lot of us thought it was the apostles or God coming down to make us all repent for our sins or something. A lot of people were highly religious, but I wasn't myself, so it didn't bother me too much. Now, I remember coming home from school one day, and I had a long walk to get back. I had to go through different parts of the forest, and I was doing so with my friend Neil at the time. Neil was a good friend. We went to our first school together, and then our second one. We were kind of troublemakers every so often. We actually got kicked out of the first one for fighting within the space of a month of each other. But I guess our paths were supposed to cross again, because what do you know, we ended up seeing each other again and our paths crossed. So we've always taken this walk back, and it was quite good just to have a talk about things. We would seemingly never run out of different things to speak to each other about, and that made it really good. I remembered that on this particular day, it was honestly exceptionally cold. I mean, far more cold than I'd realised it had been at any other time, and it didn't feel very nice. It just kind of sucks walking home. I mean, cars weren't really a thing as much back then, so that wasn't an option. My family didn't have much money, so obviously that was out of the question, but it meant more bonding time for me and my buddy. So we get to walking, and my buddy constantly looks behind himself. I start making fun of him and touching the other side of his shoulder, causing him to turn round and jump at times. He says, "Come on, knock it off." I say what's wrong, and he says, "I just feel like there's something here." I started laughing at him, saying, "Yeah, watch out, we're never going to be found again." He says, "No, knock it off." And we keep walking. Now, as we're walking, we do notice something very strange. Up in the sky, there's some kind of spinning object. It looks like a silver pan or something, just floating there. And it's got some lights on it too. I don't know what kind of lights they are, but they kind of glow like it's from a bushfire or something. And there's different colours, which is weird. I've never seen a bushfire like this. It's orange and purple and green. Maybe it was some kind of chemical that we hadn't learnt about. We start to think maybe it's something from our government. We're just really confused and just stood there for a while. Now, after standing there for probably about 20 minutes, we decide to keep moving. The only reason for that though really is because of how cold we both feel now. We know that we have to keep on going, but that thing doesn't move. Weirdly, we see it starting to drop down slowly further and further into the tree line. Now the good thing is, on this part of the walk we're actually going downhill, so it's now going to be a lot easier for us to just get to wherever this thing is, and that's what we decide to do. It's kind of close to some water, but lands just off in the ridgeline. I start to get a little bit shaken up there and tell Neil that we shouldn't investigate, and he says, you know what, you're right. But we have to keep on heading in this direction anyway. It seems like the further downhill we go, the more confident that we both become that we're going to be able to actually be alright if we investigate whatever this is. So now, I continue on with my friend, and we're both getting more and more confident, until eventually, he says it, come on man, let's just go. I say, yeah, let's do it. And we start walking towards this thing. There was also a smell. It kind of smelled like lead or copper. I don't know what it is. Or maybe some coins, but there was definitely something in the air. I actually think that I've got a nosebleed and I go to touch my face, but my buddy says, yeah, I've got the same thing. Weirdly, I did actually pick up a nosebleed not too long after, and my friend did too, which is really weird. We can never tell exactly if it was because of our noses bleeding or what. We thought maybe it was a cold, but it was weird. It was like there was a smell of metal long before the actual blood come, which was really strange. But we keep on going anyway. We're probably walking blindly into danger, but we're just curious as to what this is. Now we walk for quite a long time, and we honestly don't ever seem to be getting any closer to this, and we're both getting frustrated. We've kind of walked a bit further than we're supposed to now trying to find this thing, and it's starting to get a little bit more dark. It's cold, and while walking through the trees, now off of the path, I actually got all moss and stuff stuck on my hands, and I really hate that stuff. I spend a while trying to brush it off myself, but my friend stops me and says, hey look, I see it. I say, what'd you see? And he doesn't say anything. I'm kind of annoyed actually because I really can't see a thing, but he says, no look. And there we can see it. Just for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. There's something in the sky, not too far from where we're standing, and then there's a bright flash and this thing is gone. We stood there completely confused and baffled as to what just happened. It was like the thing just disappeared, and we start to think that we've scared it off somehow. It's a really odd experience, and I eventually go back with my friend and we forget about it. Now fast forward a few years, not much has happened since then, and that thing was long gone out of my mind. I had to work straight away after school had finished anyway, so I guess that I kind of got preoccupied with other things. But I was going through the same woods again. Now like I said, my family didn't have too much money. All of my money basically had to support the family, not get other things, and I didn't have an issue walking. Now one day I was walking home from work, just like any other day, excited for supper that my mum would have made for me. Now as I'm walking, I hear a strange sound. I really don't know how that I can describe it, other than like maybe something smashing up, like if you had a big strong hammer and it was metal, almost like you're trying to forge something. Maybe like the workers in the mill were used to, I don't know. And then, boom, an explosion. Now the shockwave made me jump, and then there's some kind of strange sound afterwards. It sounds like an animal, but not like one that I've ever heard of before. And I was curious, as I can see something smouldering not too far away. It was weird, and I really don't know what it was. So I start walking up now, trying to get to the exact source of whatever this is that's just crashed. For a second I think I see something and panic, but then I remember that I'm alone out here and I haven't seen anyone, so I start to settle down a bit. There was something that was kind of drawing me to this thing, kind of like the same feeling I had before that time with my buddy, just like there's something interesting out there and I've kind of got to go and figure out what it is. I don't know what it was exactly and I don't know how to describe it, but I just had to go out there. Now this time it was raining a lot and I couldn't move so quick. There was leaves and stuff all over the floor. I don't have anything to keep the rain off myself, but I wasn't too bothered. All of the trees are quite tall here, so it's really helping keep the water off me. So I just continue on. Now this part of the forest honestly closely resembled a jungle more than it did the area that I lived in. There was just so many trees and things everywhere that it made it hard to see up ahead. Now I'm walking and I realised that a tree really looks like the silhouette of somebody. It kind of resembled that of some kind of ape or something. I don't know. But I start walking further and I realise that it's just in my head. I think, gosh, there's definitely something up here. I just don't know exactly what it could be. As I get closer, it kind of looks like a knight almost, with some kind of cloak on or something. But it was just a tree. That's how thick and dense a forest is up here. I really can't see much of anything. Now I'm walking up and down these hills in kind of like big zigzag, weird patterns. It's the only way that you could go up it like you're a billy goat or something, so I keep doing so. This means that it's going to take a while before I find out what this is. I did think it was odd how that it was raining and it still seemed to be on fire potentially, and then I see it. It's kind of like a blue-purple hue, similar to what I've seen before, but I just can't place my finger on it. Why does this feel so familiar when I've clearly never seen this before? And then I realised that this is just like the colours of that thing I'd seen in the sky, the big pan with my friend before. I think, no, it can't be. Surely this isn't the same thing that I saw all those years ago, but it seems to be. So I keep on going. This time I want to figure out what it is. I was a bit bigger now, so I felt like I didn't have so much to be scared of like I did when I was a bit younger. I mean, why not just figure this thing out? Why not just be the guy that managed to do something? So that's what I do. I keep on heading up there. It was weirdly quiet though. I've never heard the place so still. It was almost like, you know when one of the big predators comes and everything else stops? Yeah, it was just like that. I only had that experience a few other times while hunting out with me old man. But it's something I hadn't had for a long while, so it definitely felt odd. Now I get closer, and I can hear something. It almost sounded like somebody rang a bell and put it right next to my head just to annoy me. Now it seems like the further I walk, the more it goes on. It was quite high in its tone, and I wondered whether there was actually something here if I just knocked my head or something. You know, like if you get hit really hard, you can have like a ringing in your ears, like the bell sound. Well, it's kind of similar to that, but just different. Now it doesn't stop, but eventually it's something that I become completely used to. It sounds like it's pressurized now, and I wonder what it is. I wonder if this thing, whatever it is that's exploded, is actually leaking some kind of gas in the air, and I wonder if it's going to explode like dynamite. Well, I better find out. And then I can see something odd. Further down up ahead of me, there's something glowing but moving. Whatever this thing is, it's a very bright green colour. It almost hurt my eyes to look at, which is really strange, and it looks like the fire's moving. Now this gone on for a little while, and it doesn't move much, until suddenly it seems to be getting a little bit bigger and bigger. It's so bright that I can actually see it behind the trees now. Now that's when I can finally get a better look once my eyes have adjusted to how bright this thing is. It's not as bright as the sun, but it's probably double or triple a normal moonlight, so it's quite powerful. Then I can make out more of it. It kind of looks like it's almost bulb shaped. The core is white and the outside is green. I'm really confused by what this is, and it then gets gradually closer and closer ever so slowly. I then realise that this thing is a little bit tall, taller than I am for sure, and it seems to be kind of crawling forwards. I can't see arms or anything, but it's definitely got a very pale coloured face, and it almost looks like it's smiling. It was really scary. That's when I stopped for even longer, trying to figure out if this is on its own or not. I don't see much else, so I try not to panic and just sit there waiting. After about 5 or so minutes have now passed, I now realise that this thing, whatever it is coming towards me, and it's high time that I turn around and get out of there. It looked crazy. It looked like it was out of a comic or something, the way that it was moving towards me. I could just see this burning stuff and some embers behind it, but it doesn't seem phased at all. And the sound, it hasn't stopped. So now, I decide that I've seen enough, and I start heading back in the direction that I've come from. I wasn't too bothered though. The only thing that's really bothering me is the fact that I've got shorts on. I don't know what that thing is. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like it. Maybe it was the enemy had got here and invaded us or something, and they just put their weapon on us. I don't know. I was ready to join the military if it was needed, but that come later. So I just casually make my way back, and I still can't get the ringing out my ears. I ended up hitting my head a few times trying to see if I could dislodge it. I thought maybe it was water or something from a creek, I wasn't sure. But it doesn't really subside. It just seems to get gradually more and more quiet the further that I walk towards where I need to be. And I think, well, that would teach me for exploring when I shouldn't have. So eventually I get back home. Everything's normal for a couple of days, and I hear a few of the guys at work talking about it. They're like, hey, do you see that thing in the sky? Yeah, it was crazy. Don't know what it is. It's like one of those big helium balloon things. You know the things in the sky that are silver? But he says, no, this thing was different. I don't know what this was. I then say, guys, what are you talking about? And they say, didn't you hear about it? Everybody saw that thing in the sky that night, and it just kind of crashed, bang, hit the ground real hard. Now, I open my mouth to speak, and I decide to not speak in the last second. I thought, you know what, I don't want to be the town idiot. I've just got this job and I could lose it over something like this. So I say, that's really weird. The more I'm hearing him talk about it, the more I realise that whatever I saw was probably that. I was probably the closest that anybody ever got to whatever this thing is, and I don't know what it is. I didn't really want to tell my mum or dad too, or even my brother, because they're all quite religious, and I know that they're going to take me to the church, and I already have to do that enough, and I don't like it. To them it's probably some kind of monster or demon from the gates of hell coming to get me for not living a good life. But I don't know, I just can't be bothered with it. So I decide that, well, that was that, and I forgot about it. See, a lot was happening in my life, so I seemed to be forgetting about things quite quickly. But, as always, there was more to come. And this is where it gets a bit more weird. Now, not too much longer after that happened, my brother keeps on getting this recurring nightmare. He wasn't that young too, but he would wake up literally screaming in the night. It was really scary. I mean, we'd all rush in and say, what's wrong? And he'd say, look, there was something in the window. There was something in the window. We asked him to describe it, and he said, well, it was all white, but kind of glowing green at the edges. He said it looked like a skeleton from the cemetery, but he couldn't be too sure because he was so scared. Now, this happened a few times. I asked him, where did the head come up on your window? And he said, well, it come up pretty high. It would have made that thing about 8 feet tall. I thought, wow, this is actually really weird. I said to him, do you not think it's anybody holding up a lantern? He said, no, of course not, and hit me. We actually started almost a fight then, and then eventually my mum and dad broke it up, saying, come on, stop. He says, you know what, if you're so brave, then why don't you live there? Why don't you stay in my room and I'll stay in yours? I said, fine. I'm no coward like my brother is. I'm not going to play possum if I see something there. I'm ready to fight it. I've got a rifle too, so I can go take that thing down. Also, I've got myself a flashlight now. Yeah, what's that thing gonna do? So, I start to relax a bit more. So there I am, really confident, heading into my brother's room, not worried about a thing. Now this actually went on for a while because we ended up forgetting to go back to our subsequential rooms and just stayed there. I kind of made it my home. I mean, all my possessions are in the living room basically, so it didn't matter. And I just basically started bullying my brother about how much of a coward he was and how that he weren't half the man I was. So, taking up my offer, or should I say insult, he decides that he's going to go out there and look for it. He does this alone for a while, but eventually I decide to join him. I then decide to tell him about the things that I've seen before because he said to me, you know what, have you ever had anything weird happen? I say, well, yeah, a few things. As we're patrolling the perimeter of our property, we had to defend it too because this could have been anyone. So while doing so, I explain my story and he looks at me odd. He says, you know what, that thing you talk about kind of sounds like the thing that I had seen. I'm pretty doubtful that I've seen that. It's probably nothing, man. You're probably just tired. But he says, no, it was weird. Well, anyway, we head back in without finding much of anything and I drift off to sleep. So then I wake up to some kind of tapping sound. Don't know what it is, but it jolts me up as I suddenly realise my duty on what I'm doing. I quickly get up and grab the light. I don't turn it on as I look around trying to see where did it come from. I can't see much of anything until then. I lock eyes or faces with something. It's that glowing thingy again. That demon, it's there. I say, God, what's that? I say, hey, and I turn on the flashlight and for some reason, the second the beam hit this thing's face, it kind of starts to run off. I could actually see where it was going because for a little while afterwards, in each step, there was some kind of glowing stuff which was green on the floor. I say, come on. I go to rouse up my brother, but he's too tired for this. And he's trying to get up quickly, but I say, come on, follow me. As I grab my rifle and some tape and my light, and I quickly tape this onto the rifle so I can see what I'm doing and shoot. I think I'm going to get me this kill. I've had enough of this, and I've decided that I'm going to go for it and start hunting it. Wow, this thing moved fast. Boy, I don't even know if I can keep up with it. I quickly follow where I can see the glowing embery things on the floor. It's more like goo the closer I get to it. It probably lasts for about a minute, but it's just enough to leave a trail to figure out where I'm going. The weirdest thing ever is that maybe it caught on fire, or I don't know. Every time that my torch actually goes over to this thing, or where it was, it kind of glows, which is really weird. I don't know if it's starting to set alight or what it is. They're not candles and they're not torches themselves, so I don't know what it is. But I can't figure out where this thing is. I ended up realising that my brother's come behind me and I almost shot him. It'd probably have been a good thing some days, but I scream at him. I was like, why didn't you tell me you're coming? He says, relax, just go. And we constantly follow this thing. My brother's got himself a pan, I don't know why. He's ready to whack that thing over the head, and so am I. And we start chasing even more. That's when we round a corner, and we can see it. That thing's just sitting there. It's crouched down like it's injured. I scream out to it, who are you? What are you doing on our land? And I let off a shot close to its head. That's when that thing stood up. With every inch it grew in height, I start to tremble a bit more. That thing was massive. It was almost as big as one of the little trees we have on our yard. It was about 8.5 feet tall. It turned around, still glowing not very much, and that's when I hear a whistle sound. Well, I was so scared that I actually dropped the rifle and start sprinting with my brother in complete syncrasy, and we start running back the way that we come, with our actual path still guided by the glowing embers of whatever that thing left on the ground. I can hear it, my brother screams as we realise that this thing has started chasing us. My brother starts tearing up. I say, come on, snap out of it, and I start screaming for my dad. We eventually get back into the house and slam the door behind us, and somehow my dad was asleep still, but my mum wakes him up. We say there's something out there. It's got the gun. It's got the gun. My dad quickly breaks out his shotgun, and all three of us head out now. Maybe it was like the tribe mentality, but I felt a lot more confident now, and so did my brother. And we actually start running towards where that we'd seen it. But we get there, and we can see the glow of my torch and my rifle. I say, yes, this is it. We had a look round everywhere, but can't see a thing. I then hesitantly and slowly start going further towards it. Then I'm able to pick up my rifle and just pan the torch around. But again, I can't see a thing. We ended up staying out there for probably another good hour or two, until eventually my dad says, alright boys, let's head back. Must have scared him off, whoever it was. Then I say, but Dad, this wasn't a person, this was a thing. My brother goes, yeah, it wasn't. He says, come on, that's enough now, and let's head back. And that was the last that I ever saw of it. Still don't know what it was, or if it was somebody out there messing with us, but it seems a bit far-fetched to me. I've never seen it since, but I'm always left wondering, am I going to encounter it again, and will I be alone like the other time? I hope not. In May 1985, my friend and I were returning to the United States after we had spent a week wandering and camping in Canada. We are both female. Being 20 years old, we had scarce any money, and we had just spent the last of it on gas, so we needed to make it home. We drove into the night late. By 1 AM we have a few more hours left. We were travelling south on Route 84 to Illinois. My friend was driving and we're having a great time. We chatted up a storm as we made our way down the little 2-lane highway. It's probably a scenic road by day, but at night everything is pitch black. Suddenly, a shape appeared at the very edge of our headlights. It looked like a log was laying on the opposite lane. As we get closer, the log turns out to be the legs of a man sitting on the highway. As we got even closer, we could see that the man was sitting on the solid white line of the opposite lane, legs just sitting there out on the highway like he's waiting for cars to come. We slowed down, swerving towards him. We said a few things like, I wonder if he needs help, why is he laying there? The headlights completely illuminate him as we drive towards him. He sat face down on the opposite side of the road, so we were looking at him in profile. He's wearing a brown suit, brown shoes and a brown hat. His arms hung down by his side. At first he didn't even acknowledge us or move in any way. We just stare at him in silence. Suddenly though, he jerked his face towards us. His eyes were glowing red, his mouth open and twisted in a snarl. We were completely terrified. I should mention that, to my friend's credit, she doesn't panic and actually swerves out of the way, reacting very quickly, punching the gas, making a getaway. As we've actually sped away, we both turn to have a look at the face out the back of the window, but we can't see too well in the darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling of the wrongness, like we stumbled across something we weren't supposed to see. It looked like a person, but those eyes were glowing and not human. Now, today I'd like to share my story that happened quite a number of years ago, though the feelings have never really left me. I'm somebody who spent a lot of time working out in nature. I was a park ranger, so I'd always done things outside. I mean, not just while I was at work, but for other reasons too. I remembered I had some friends that were really begging me to go out to the desert with them. I had this best friend called John, and he was the one who was the most up for it. He kept on telling me about all of these crazy experiences that he had out in this particular area of the desert. He said that he would see these people, well, he kind of describes them as some kind of beings or something, and I don't know, it was linked to UFOs and things, and I'm actually sure that I saw a UFO once. I was on top of one of our towers that you use for lookouts, and I saw a light in the sky that almost appeared red then purple. then suddenly split off in 4 different directions with different sections of it going the different ways. So yeah, I was kind of up for this. I was a little skeptical. I mean, even though I'd seen a UFO, I didn't really trust my eyes. And being out there and being so bored at times, I guess your mind plays tricks on you. But this friend John kept on and on going on about it, and eventually I decided to agree. He said it was kind of like a spiritual place that you could go to, and pretty much you'd be able to talk through all of your problems with these beings and that everything would be okay. Now, don't ask me why I actually agreed to do this. I don't know, I guess I wasn't thinking at the time. I'm not someone who really gives into peer pressure too. He'd actually been going on about this for ages, and I don't know, I felt bad for always saying no, so we set out on one particular day. We parked up and made sure that we have all of our water with us, and we set off. Now, we had some camping gear with us, so we're going to be okay as long as the water didn't run too low. We decided that we'd never go far from where we parked, so that way we can always go back and get more supplies if we really need them. So with that, off we went. Now, the first area that we're going in, you can see lots of different tire tracks, and apparently according to John this wasn't good because it meant other people would be around, but he told me not to worry too much about this. The area that we're in is actually pretty nice. We're kind of flanked by hills, and there's kind of like a mountainy part up ahead of us. It looks really cool though, to be honest. And we continue on our hike. Now, John's actually a really good friend, and he's genuinely one of the only people that actually understands me and is very similar with me in life. We have had a few arguments, but just over silly things, and I guess this guy was more of a brother than my actual brother to me at times. Now, that meant we would talk about everything. Often it was about relationships and other things that had went wrong in our lives before, and the more we spoke, I guess the more that we realised we're similar. And again, I didn't actually know just how similar we were. I mean, heck, it was pretty unbelievable, but I won't share too many details here about that, just because it kind of goes into some of the darkness that we both seem to experience somehow at the same time, almost living opposite lives, but parallel emotionally. So we talk through everything, and he says that we're not too far from where we need to get to, and that's when we encounter the first group of people. Now, they do seem a little bit weird at first. John also seems a little bit hesitant, but he ends up going up to them and starts talking. It turns out that they're here for the same reason, and although they seem a little bit weird, we decide to try and talk to them. I wasn't sure if one of them was on something, but he just seemed too talkative. They tell us that they've got something they want us to drink, and apparently they made some nice bush tea for us. Who was I to say no, and I end up drinking it. We exchange a couple of snacks, and it was actually a really good time. Now, we'd been with these guys for quite a while, and eventually decide that it's time to leave them and go on. Now, we continue on our way, and you can actually see that the path is marked by different rocks that people have put there, so we know that we're not going anywhere too dangerous or anything. My friend John constantly reminds me to drink lots of water, and I keep doing so. I seem to get a headache now, which I really can't fend off for some reason. I have pretty sensitive eyes though. I can't even look at the ground when it's bright without sunglasses, without my eyes being strained. I also get this weird thing where I kind of see like flashy lights or something, but I know what it is. It's not a migraine, but I guess it's just my eyes going weird. Sometimes I'll see a strange bright colour too, but I guess that doesn't matter too much. We come up to one part of the hike where there's quite a big drop on the left hand side of us. If we're going to fall now, we're going to be in trouble, so we really try our best to avoid this. My friend then says that we haven't got too much further to go before we get to the people, and that's when we encounter some rangers. That's really odd, I think. There shouldn't be any rangers up here whatsoever. I don't know what they're doing, and we just say hi, and don't really think much of it and just keep going. They seem a little odd, but I wasn't paying too much attention. That's when my buddy John says, "Did you notice something?" I say, "No, what's that?" He says, well, those guys looked almost exactly the same as each other, and I don't know, something just felt really off about them. I didn't really notice it, but trying to think of it, it almost felt like they didn't have much of a facial expression, almost like they were wearing a rubber mask, but I can't really tell. They eventually go off a little bit further, and we don't think too much of it as they slowly go out of sight. I then explained that I've heard about some twins who become park rangers in an area not far from where I was working at the time, and that, yeah, it's just basically a normal thing that you will get stuff like this. You know, you get families who are raised in the outdoors like me, and that's what the families want to do, jobs like ours. And my buddy John tells me not to worry too much and makes a joke out of it. And I tell him, hey, I'm not the one worried here, and we press on. Now my friend keeps on talking to me about this thing and how great it's going to be, and eventually we set up the tents. We do this, and I keep on slamming my water. One thing that's weird is that I haven't really had the urge to urinate too much yet. Usually I'll be going like every 10 seconds almost, but I don't really feel the urge to. I guess it was hot, but the weird thing is it's not really too hot now. There's kind of an overcast in the clouds, and it means that it's not really warm, it's actually a little bit cold. But John says, hey, come on man, we've got to go up to this before sundown, because this hill is where you're going to see it. Now I was either convinced that he was just off his head, or there were actually aliens here. We're nowhere near Roswell, so it wasn't anything like that, but I don't know, I've given him the benefit of the doubt. Talking to this friend though was honestly like a therapy in itself. It was almost like the ideas that I had, my friend could give me, and the ideas that he had, he could give me, and it would kind of complete each other. Not in a weird way, but just kind of like a nice bond and friendship. So yeah, it's getting a little bit dark, and I keep telling my buddy that we have to remember where the tent is because we're not going to see it. My friend doesn't take much notice of me and keeps on going. Now, he says that he's going to continue on, but I say that I feel like I need to stop for a bit. I don't know why, but suddenly the headache becomes absolutely overwhelming. Now, my friend continues on and I just let him go. Now, I feel extremely tired suddenly and I don't want to sleep, but you know when you try and lay on your side and not sleep, you know what happens? Yeah, you end up sleeping. Now, that was exactly what happened to me. I managed to wake myself up a couple of times, but I kind of drift off again. It's almost like I've got an alarm clock in my head, but I permanently had it on snooze and I wake up again. When I woke up, I felt like I'd slept for ages and almost like I'd had the best night's sleep of my life, but everything felt different now. I get up and look at the sky, and it's kind of got like an orange hue to it, and I continue on the trail and try and find where my friend is. For some reason when I wake up, I suddenly feel much more peaceful. I wasn't concerned about finding my friend, and I presumed that he just left me there to sleep and went back to the tent, so I decided to go on myself. I drank quite a lot of water again, and I was actually running out in my first tank, which is surprising. Again, no urge to urinate, which I think is really weird, but I keep going. Now, as I'm walking, I can hear a strange humming. It was almost like a kind of energy is the best way I can describe it. I wasn't entirely sure what it was, but I knew I should keep going. I thought maybe, just maybe, this is what John was telling me about. And I thought in the back of my head, maybe this is him up here making those sounds. I decide to continue, and I make it a bit further now. The going's actually quite tough here, and the terrain's quite rocky now. I'm not too happy about this because I keep on whacking my shins when I'm trying to go up this thing. And also I keep getting little branches and things that are cutting up my ankles. But for some reason I'm not too bothered by this, and that's weird too, because usually I'm really worried. As I get higher and higher up, I realise something weird now. I seem to be talking to myself in my head kind of far too much. It's quite weird. It goes from very positive to suddenly very negative, and it keeps on switching between the two. And that's when I realise it. Something's different about the sky. The colours seem off and the sky just seems far too bright. Now, I think this is really bizarre, but nothing too much to worry about. Again, I wasn't really thinking straight at this time. Now, I end up just walking and walking, and I don't necessarily have a destination in mind. I don't know how far I was gone for, but I see my buddy up ahead of me. At least I think it's John. I say, John, John, and he keeps on walking and rounds a corner. I think, God, you're such an idiot. My foot was starting to hurt now, and I can't be bothered to walk quicker, but I practically force myself to power up towards him. I eventually make it there, and I realise something strange. He's just vanished. I try and figure out where that he's actually gone to, and I walk up the hill and look over it, and there he is again. John! John, I scream out, but he doesn't listen. What's weird is that he just keeps on and on walking, but he seems to be far too far away from me. Even if he sprinted down this hill, he shouldn't have been able to get this far, and I suddenly realise that I can't see him any longer. I think this is odd, and I look around, and suddenly I've realised that there's a few more people around. There's quite a lot up on a ridge, and they're all waving at me, trying to get me to come over to them. I can see that they brought some kind of dirt bike with them, and I put my hand on it, but I decide to leave it because it's theirs. I think that this is a group that we've seen earlier, so I start to go further and further. And my God, do I have a bad migraine or something, because my eyes are going a bit funny. I'm kind of seeing the weird colours again, but my vision's definitely a bit off now. I try not to think too much of it, and I reach down and realise that there's all water over my hand. I quickly start slapping around trying to figure out where the source of it's from, and notice how cold my hand is, when I realise that suddenly my hand isn't wet and it's in my head. I'm not aware that something's off at this point, and I just thought it was lucky that there's no water here. I then open up my bag and start drinking, and I realise that the heavens have opened up now. There's rain falling all around me, and it feels quite nice to be out of the desert sun. Now, I eventually make it up to the hill where all the people are waving, and it seems like they're being very friendly to me, saying good things and encouraging me. I stop to get a bit of breath and rest my legs for a few moments, and I say, hey guys, wait for me, I won't be long. And that's when I realise that my vision's gone a bit weird. It almost feels like I'm going backwards now, but I'm not. I take a few deep breaths and I become very, very conscious of my breathing and the rain around me. This calms me a lot, and I think the deep breathing did me some good. And I'll continue on and make sure that I can see my new friends at the top of the hill. There seems to be less and less of them now, and I eventually make it all the way up there. Now when I get to the very top, suddenly something changes. It's almost like they've all just appeared around me suddenly, but as I look at them, their faces seem off, and I suddenly notice that there's something very inhuman about them. Now, their faces look much more scary, and suddenly they morph into some kind of dark figures which tower over me. I mean, it starts off with about my height until they're about 2 or 3 times taller, and suddenly they surround me. But for whatever reason, I don't feel afraid and I don't feel scared of anything. I kind of notice that they're around me, and because I can't see now, I kind of lose my balance and fall over for a second. When I fall over, I'm staring back up at the sky now. I don't feel any pain or anything, but I can see lightning bolts all around me, and the rain picks up a lot more. I wiped my eyes trying to figure out what was happening when I eventually managed to get myself up off the ground again. I'm looking around and the figures are gone. I think, my God, did I encounter them? Was that it? What did I get out of this? Did I learn anything? Did I see anything? Are they actually there? And I think that this can't necessarily be anything that I actually believe's there. And I decide that I should keep looking for John. It suddenly clicks again. Now, that's when I start to get a bit scared. I have a sudden feeling of panic, and the more that I panic, the worse I feel, and I start picking up the pace more and more. And I start to see these beings again. These are different from the ones that I've seen earlier, and they seem a lot more malicious and malevolent. The further I go, the closer they seem to come towards me. It gets to a point where I honestly feel like there's an army of them behind me, and I don't dare look around. I'm not sure how long this went on for with this weird feeling of being followed, but my god, it must have been a long time. And I can tell you that I did not feel good during 1 second of it. I was trying to loop my way back round to where the tent should be, but to be honest I had no idea of where I was going. Now, as you can imagine, this is incredibly dangerous out in the desert, especially if you're on your own, but I wasn't thinking of that. I remember eventually I was able to stop and turn around, and they're gone again. I look up in the sky for UFOs, and the stars seem to be too bright, and there seems to be too many of them. I wipe my eyes and it's rain again. I realise something's definitely off now. I start trying to hit my head, not hard, just enough to make sure I'm awake, but yes I am. Now suddenly things seem to go straight back to normal. The raining stopped now, which I'm pretty happy about, and I continue now, but I'm no longer on the path. I'm going towards some kind of darker area now, where the sun seems to be far from me. I get here and I feel like I'm on a barren wasteland, and I call out for John. All I'm met with is echoes, and I'm convinced that he's back in the tent. I say, John, you better be in that tent and I better find you there. And I start trying to go downhill now, and that's when I fall. I don't know how it happened, but I can only imagine that my foot got snagged on a rock, and I actually fall quite a bit down, tumbling. I fall asleep again, and now I wake up and John is prodding me. At least I think it's John. I say, John, what are you doing? Confused as to who it is, and that's when I see it. One of the dark beings has found me, and there's a sea of stars behind him, and he takes me by my hand and lifts me up. Now, as he's lifting me up, I realise that I'm in some kind of different area again to where I thought I was. For some reason, this being seems a lot more friendly than the others, and seems to be guiding me away from wherever I was before. I look back and I can see the army of the others once again, and this thing just demands without saying anything that I look forward, and that's exactly what I do. Now, I keep going down pretty treacherous terrain, but this thing seems to be really helping me get through. Now, as weird as it sounds, I was pretty much having a full-on conversation with this thing in my head. It spoke in almost like a hushed tone, but kind of with more reverberation. It was like every time that it spoke, I would hear things and feel it through my body. I was asking where we were going and it said to safety, and I kept asking what's happening and it kept saying don't worry, don't worry. Now, I'm not sure when it happened, but this being, whatever it is, left me, and it was up to me to continue the rest of the journey. I look around and it's much further away now, pointing, trying to usher me to go forwards, and I follow it. I'm now walking pretty close to some kind of crevasse or something. Almost like a very, very small Grand Canyon is probably the best way that I can describe it, but maybe not grand because of how small it is. Again, I'm going on a pretty sheer rock face, and how I don't fall at this point is beyond me. I know that my fall was definitely real though because of the blood on my white socks. Now, it doesn't take too much longer, and a miracle happens. I can see the tent, and it's where it should be, and I can see the silhouette of something or someone in it. Is it my friend? What is it, I think to myself. Now, I'm pretty much glued to the spot, and I've realised that I've been asking myself this over and over again in my head for God knows how long, until eventually I decide that I've got to will myself forward, and it's almost like I've got to will one foot ahead of the other. I eventually make it there and open the tent, and John's there. I say, John, what are you doing? He says, "Hi, you're back. I was getting worried about you." I say, "What do you mean?" He said, "I thought you said you were going to come back soon and we're going to take a leak." I say, "I didn't say that. You were just going up the hill." And he looks at me very confused. I then tell him about the beings, and he tells me that he saw some too, but he wasn't sure what to think of it, because he was quite tired and thought it was a dream. He then tells me that he thinks what he saw was me, and called out, but I didn't reply, so he told me to meet me back at the tent, and he fell asleep. I decided not to tell him exactly what I'd seen, and I ended up crashing out. Now, I woke up again the next morning, and my god did I feel terrible. My body felt like absolute crud, and I decided the best thing to do is slam lots of water. I feel a lot better, and suddenly my heart starts pounding. Suddenly, all of my senses come flooding back to me, and the fear, this terrible fear of realizing what had happened the night before, comes back to me. I let out a loud gasp and grab my friend John, who is still sleeping. I shake him awake, and it looks like he's just seen a ghost because of the way that I've awoken him. I then explain everything that happened to him, and that's when it hits us. Something was definitely off last night. I explain my story, and he then tells me his, and we weirdly both describe the beings as being almost exactly the same as each other, and we have this horrible feeling of dread, like something's really off. My friend John now realizes that he definitely didn't understand what actually happened to me, and that it's weird because we have different stories of how we lost each other. We decide that we need to go back and make sure that we stay nice and hydrated because we're going to move quick, and we quickly pack up the things. Now, I can't describe to you the feeling of dread that I had when I packed up everything and I start heading back with John. I was absolutely convinced that it was paramount that we were about to be followed by those beings. Now, I have to tell you, in this moment, it was so real. What I'd seen and experienced is truly like nothing else I've ever seen on Earth before. And I don't know, in the moment I was kind of in this trance, so I just guess I went along with it. I remembered every time that I'd see a bush or tree that was darker than the rest, I almost had a mini heart attack. But I kept going. I didn't have a choice. The weird thing is too that the landscape all looked different from the way we'd come in. Luckily though, John knew the way, and eventually we make it back to the rocks which had been put there by others to mark the way. Now, neither of us say anything. We're both very paranoid and constantly looking around, trying to see if there's anything there, or any kind of explanation for what we'd just seen. We start talking a bit, and that's the more scared we get, the more we try and match up what had happened. Now, eventually we do make it back, and my god, getting back to being inside a vehicle was probably the best feeling in the world. I was actually so shaken up that I couldn't drive though, and I just had to lock the doors and just lay in the seat for a while, trying to think of what had happened. Had we been drugged? My buddy John then says that he thinks that we were probably drugged, and that those guys probably spiked us with something that we ate or drank. He said it sounded like a weird drug that he had heard about before that can make you hallucinate, and apparently the plant for it and seeds are actually quite common in nature, and he thinks they probably got it from here and thought it'd be funny to do it and not tell us. I was convinced of the same thing because the whole thing just felt so weird. God, how could they be so evil to us? I mean, we literally could have died. We could have ended up like those hikers who went out into the wilderness and just disappeared. What really worried me is the fact that we got separated out here, completely out of our minds, both of us. Now, anything could have happened to me. I checked for bruises and I didn't have a headache or anything, but I could have easily hit my head and got brain bleeding or something. I don't know, it's just too easy to happen out here. But the thing that neither of us understand is, how do we get back? We both agree that we're probably miles away from each other at some point, because at the very least, we should have heard each other screaming out, but we didn't hear a thing. And the rest of the drive back was a pretty weird one. This is when the both of us discovered that we had also seen the rain before, but The area around us didn't seem to be too wet. I mean, yeah, it is a desert, so it could have just evaporated, but I don't know. It just felt a little bit different somehow. And eventually we get back. Now we make it to John's mum's house, and John's mum says, "God, you guys must have seen it. Surely you guys seen it. Tell me you did. It was right where you guys were staying." We look at each other very concerned. Was this the first that the beings had been actually reported or what? And his mum then says, "Did you see the UFO? I saw it. So many of our neighbours saw it." I say, "What do you mean?" Getting a little bit angry. She says, "The UFO, so many of us saw it. Those weird flashing lights in the sky. It was almost like a big triangle with red glowing orbs under it. It went over to roughly where you guys were staying in the desert. Then a few more appeared, and it was there in the same place for about a good half an hour." My heart drops now. Apparently it was accompanied by a quick storm, and suddenly they just shot off, never to be seen again that night. Apparently hundreds of people had all seen the same thing, and the timeline pretty much matched up to when we got over there. Now, me and John looked at each other, and we went off into his room and sat down for a while. We made some tea, and just kind of stared at each other, not knowing what to say. Now, it's been quite a while since this experience, and I don't know, I could have very easily been drugged with my friend, but the fact that a lot of what we had seen matched up with each other, and the other fact that so many people had seen something in the sky that night exactly where we are, it just seems a little bit weird. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know. One of the main responsibilities I had working in my national park is to make sure that I survey the climate testing devices. I'm not in the United States of America too, so it might be different out there, but we really put a lot of emphasis onto checking the air quality and trying to maintain it. We try and keep it to the highest possible standard that we can, and it's not really easy, but we have lots of trees, which is really a good thing. Now, on this particular day, I set out to check the first 3 posts, and they were fine. I go into the 4th and final one, and it's starting to get dark. I can then see that there's a colleague who's already there, so I don't think much of it. I just continue doing my job and do a friendly wave, but I don't get one back. I turn around and go to do my other task, hoping that this person has done it for me, expecting them to catch up with me. I then realise that they look odd. Something about the way that they're standing hunched over just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't look like somebody who's happy and healthy. It looks like somebody who's a little bit off. I don't know, just their whole demeanour seems really strange to me. I then throw my flashlight over, thinking maybe they're in trouble, and I get the fright of my life. I'm met with something that is wearing an all dark robe, has a very weird goat kind of face, and looks like what I can only describe as the devil, with completely black eyes. It's probably about 7 feet tall, and slowly turns to face me. I drop the flashlight, and within a moment, I'm bolting the opposite direction. Eventually I make it back to the station, and I frantically explain what's happened, and some of the other guys go to check it out. We can't find anything, just my flashlight and its dying light now, because it's been out there in the cold for a while. We don't find a person or devil, but we do find something weird. There are hoof marks in the ground, exactly where I saw this thing. Weirdly, there's none leading away, just perfectly in the position that I saw this thing standing there. We never saw this thing again, but it actually is in our folklore to have things like this around, so I'm certain what I saw was probably the devil or some kind of demonic entity.